I am calling the June 21, 2023 meeting of the Historic Landmarks Commission to order.
Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, there we go. So, first order of business is a roll call.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and take roll call. Vice Chair House,
I am here.
Commissioner Butler,
Here.
Commissioner Dorden,
Here.
Commissioner Drury,
Here.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Here.
Commissioner Lundvik,
Yes, here.
Commissioner McClure,
Here.
Commissioner Uli,
Present.
and Chair Grumbine is absent. We have quorum. Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll move on to general public comment.
We've
We'll
got
do that later.
Yes.
Okay, we will do A then, because this guy is pretty important. So this is comments from Mayor Rouse on advisory group, public service, and decorum training.
Thank you. I thought you were talking about somebody else for a minute. I was looking around the room. So this is rather ironic, given that we just finished up some pretty hairy budget sessions and me to talk to anybody about decorum and conduct on the dais. But these are general things that we used to do every year in big groups, and trying to avoid that cat herd again. We got away from COVID and whatnot, but we used to have these big sessions, and they were good because they're like little mini retreats. We review things that should be the way they are, and particularly about the way we present to the public, because you guys are the extension of us. And when you don't behave well, then we hear about it, and we get to hear those people in these appeals in city council. But I recognize that over the last few years, HLC has been shown the hand, mostly by council, because of what we have or have not done in your turf, which is the El Pueblo Viejo. And I know that's got to be frustrating. It frustrates me, and I'm not even a design guy. So we certainly have talked about that. And of course, the ERETO is came up yesterday morning. Mr. House was there, Hensberg was there, but we'll be at it again on the 27th in council and deciding what we're going to do about all that. Where that comes in with you guys, I'm not really sure, because whatever design standards and guidelines I do not think are going to be a part of this discussion. It's more about how we manage things going forward. But we do have a monster design issue on the horizon that we're going to have to decide about, and I sure hope that we give HLC a little bit more of an ear than we have over the last few years. Anyway, so traditionally, HLC has always been one of the more controversial committees. Number one, because there's so many of you, which is always not easy to do. Number two is because you're trying to wrestle down things that aren't necessarily black and white into an objective-looking decision that's free of caprice, it's free of any interpretation the public or your clients could have about what you're thinking about. And it's so important that as you're doing your work, that you do it in a professional, controlled way, because the public, your clients, or your customers, however you want it, are really dependent on that, number one. Number two is the idea is that they're going to walk out of here with a project that's better because of the actions of this committee. I know that sounds like Camelot, but I really do think, and you do hear it from time to time, people walk out of here with a better project than they walked in with. But that's the way it should feel, look, and be, as opposed to, oh my God, I've got to go to HLC, God save me now. So, which is kind of more the traditional way. I have an experience, I built two businesses in a house in this town, so I've been in that chair before. And it dissolved during one of my projects so poorly that, and staff and the board just started yelling at each other. And I finally got up and I said, let me know when you're done. And I went back to work. And Don Olson came down to apologize to me for that kind of conduct. I haven't seen anything like that since, fortunately. But it is one of those things I think about all the time, because as the public, you're going to go on, how can they possibly make a decision on my life's most important investment when they can't even have their act together up here? So your professional conduct, your decorum, your status as professionals, which is why we chose you, is really, really important. And once again, you're having things you don't necessarily have to agree on, but you have to come up with a conclusion that makes sense to your applicant. And you don't want your applicant to walk out of there, well, House was just in a bad mood again today. That's why he didn't like my doorway, or whatever it was. But, it's really important that they get that feeling that, they are dealing with professionals. And you guys, as professionals, all have clients, and you know what it's like to be in that seat, and you know what it's like, how it's like to feel like you're being treated by a board that's either being capricious and unprofessional, or a board that really has the needs of the city in line. And that means sometimes, occasionally, you'll have to approve something you don't personally like that much. I get to do that all the time. But what I'd like to do, in my wildest dream, is never have appeals come before us again, which they're going to anyway, we all know. But because people feel like they really got a solid, cogent answer out of this board. Doesn't mean their neighbor won't appeal them. I get that. But when you have a really strong vote, and when we see a strong majority and or a unanimous vote, it's pretty darn compelling when it comes to the appeal, and you kind of wonder what the appellants are doing in the room, because we are the last resort, and we are the least qualified to do all this. This is why we moved to have SFBD be appealable to Planning Commission, because they have more of the skills than we do, certainly. That's not a high threshold, of course, but that's just the way that is. But once again, your different opinions, your different looks at things are valuable as long as we conduct them in a way that looks like you're having a professional, not a personal discussion. I used to go through this with my management staff all the time when I was in business, that would drag in their personal problems or whatever it was to work, and the employees were just dying to dig into their personalities, and because whatever they did wasn't wrong, it was just that, Steve was in a bad mood, or whoever it was at the time. So it's important, and again, you guys have all been around the block long enough to know what it's like to be a professional, what it's like to sit with professionals, and what it's like to deal with professionals. So, once again, our goal is to have the product that comes out here, the client, feel like they got dealt with in the most professional way, and that maybe what they had wasn't absolutely correct, and maybe you helped them get to that place. And that's our idea. Our idea is to get you to a place of success. And it doesn't mean you have to accept anything and everything, but it does mean we have to be helpful and look at people like we're here to help you, not to make your life more miserable. So that's really all I had to say. You got to hear all the fun stuff from the folks from before, so we don't have to go through all that again. But thank you for your time, and most of all, thank you for doing what you do, because I know it's a lot of time and a lot of work, and I know you do it because you really care about the city, and someday we're going to give you your downtown back. Is there any media here? Go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, now we will move on to public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair House. If anyone in the audience would like to make comments on items not on today's agenda, please go ahead and spell out a speaker slip on the side of the room and turn it into me. While I'm waiting for that, we do not have any virtual participants, so no virtual public comment, nor do we have any written correspondence. And I'm not seeing anyone move to make any speaker slips, so with that, I'll turn it back to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. I will close general public comment. And next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of June 7th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Uli,
Second.
second by Butler. Are there any corrections or comments? Doesn't appear there are any. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner Dorden,
Abstain.
Commissioner Drury,
Abstain.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Lundvik,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
and Vice Chair House.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar of June 21st, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Drury, second by Uli.
Staff will read into the record the motions from the consent hearing. 835 Laguna Street received project design approval and final approval. 1524 State Street received project design approval and final approval. 1713 Leswin Road received final approval. 834 Santa Barbara Street was continued indefinitely with comments regarding the planter boxes and the trash enclosure. And item E, 2948 Serena Road, received final approval.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
I abstain from item E, and yes to the others.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Lundvik,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
and Vice Chair House.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Staff has one announcement that item 5 on today's agenda was postponed to August 2nd at the applicant's request. So the Plaza de la Guerra project will return at that time.
Why was it such a long continuance?
If I may, so a couple of things. We had a short meeting on May 24th to accommodate the State Street Advisory Committee. So that kind of condensed the number of development projects that the commission could review. And then we also canceled the meeting for the July 4th holiday week. So that kind of put us at a disadvantage for, again, being able to schedule development projects. So that's why we had to schedule a special hearing. So just one other announcement that we'll have our HLC special hearing on July 12th. At our usual time, 1:30. So we'll have a pretty substantive, it's a pretty packed agenda for that day, and then 2 weeks from then on the 26th. So we've just had kind of a backlog, so we're trying to get through that. And unfortunately, we want to make sure that there's sufficient time for that project or, the concept review, and so it's a little pinched. It would be too much to add on to the other two agendas.
Thank you for the explanation. Are there any other announcements or?
Chair House, I just wanted to mention that, did everybody get this magazine that I had contacted Montecito Journal, and they were very generous in giving these to us so that everyone could have one. So I hope everyone got their copy. It's a beautiful article about De La Guerra Plaza.
Very good article. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. No other announcements. We'll move on to subcommittee reports. Are there any?
I have a report from designations.
Okay.
The man who just left the room and his colleague, Councilwoman Snedden, are working to bring an item to council to support the HLC's award idea. And as a way to keep the spirit moving,
About some spirits.
Yeah, Bill Mahan and I have funded the bronze version of these, but these are plaster versions that will keep you inspired to, here's another one.
These are for us.
Yes, they are.
Very nice.
And pass those down the way there.
Thank you.
So we're working on moving this forward, and we're just waiting for the item to come before council to authorize HLC to have such a thing, since it's not part of our charter. And so it's making some progress.
Very nice.
So this can go on my front door?
If you want.
Yeah.
The agenda of the designation committee.
No, that's coming up.
So,
I missed that.
okay. Are there any other subcommittee reports? No, I guess not. So we will move on to the first item on the agenda, and we're right on time for that. And that is 1221 Anacapa Street. This is located in El Pueblo Viejo. This is the solar photovoltaic system on the upper level of the city-owned Granada Garage that will also function as a parking canopy. Let's see, the project also includes the removal of existing rooftop light poles and 13 small olive trees in pots to allow for the new solar photovoltaic canopy. Planning Commission approved a height exception on December 10th, 2020, allowing the project to exceed the standard height limit of 45 feet in the commercial general high-density residential priority housing overlay CG zone. That's a mouthful. Okay. So no final appealable action will take place at this meeting. This is just an in-progress review. It's a courtesy update on minor changes to the plans which received final approval on March 2nd of 2022. So if you'd please introduce yourselves and give your presentation.
Perfect. Hold on 1 second. Excellent. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jefferson Litton. I recently joined the city as the Energy and Climate Manager in the Sustainability and Resilience Department. With me today, I have Rachel Pelk and Christian Hofflin. It's an honor to be before this commission and present a courtesy informational update about some minor changes to the Granada Garage solar array. As a reminder, per the passage of AB 1124, this project is no longer subject to city aesthetic review departments. However, I know that this commission spent a great deal of time reviewing this project, so we wanted to offer an explanation of the minor revisions to the design. So to recap, this project was last before the commission in March 2022. More recently, the project, as it went through building and safety review, the original design that was reviewed by this commission was no longer consistent to changes in state fire code, requiring sprinklers underneath certain solar arrays. Upon review, the flat section of panels adjacent to Anna Pamu Street would no longer allow heat and gases to properly escape per the second exemption listed above. This design would have triggered a full sprinkler system to be required to be installed beneath the entire array. Those sprinklers would have required additional structural support, a significant delay in the project, which would have caused the loss of significant state funding towards the project. Additionally, this added cost would most likely have made this an infeasible project. So in order to make this project safe, meet the fire code, and avoid abandoning the project, the new design includes tilting those flat panels adjacent to Anna Pamu Street 5 degrees and increasing the gap between the panels. Per the fire marshal, these changes meet the second exemption highlighted above in red. In the following slides, I'll share images of those changes. So the changes that we're talking about only apply to the section of panels that are shown in the red boxes in the image in the right. Just to orient you here, those red boxes are closest to Anna Pamu Street, and in front of those red boxes towards Anna Pamu Street is the lattice that this commission had asked to be included into the project. The image in the left shows the tilt under the new design with a 5-degree tilt and an increase in the gap between rows of panels from 1/2 inch to 10 inches. This image here shows the lattice detail. The layout from the original design is shown on top. The new design with revisions is shown on the bottom. The leftmost image shows you the end view of the lattice. So the lattice is closest to Anna Pamu Street. So as you're looking at this image, if you were to the left, you would be on Anna Pamu Street. Looking end on, as you look at your camera, that's as if you were on Anacapa Street. I'm looking. So in the top design, you can see the panels laying flat with the lattice to the left. In the bottom design, the bottom left image, you see the lattice to the left and the panels. Looking from the width view, you would sort of see the 5-degree tilt there. From the length section, so this is if you were looking at the panels from Anna Pamu Street. You can see the original design with them laying flat in the top right image. In the bottom right image, you see that 5-degree tilt. And that tilt is tilting them towards the Granada Theater. Any questions about those images as you see them right now?
I guess I would just like to make sure I understand that the only change is the tilt of the panels and the spacing between them, but the lattice is as previously approved.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And these images will probably better illustrate it than the last ones. So this is the original design. You can see the lattice towards Anna Pamu Street, and then you can see those panels laying flat immediately behind the lattice, as well as that array to the top left of what you're looking at. Those panels were to be sitting flat as well. In the new image, you can see the lattice is still there. The tilt you can see most prominently in the leftmost panels.
Here's another image, again, standing on Anapamu Street, this time oriented due north. This was the original design with the flat panels, so you can see the lattice and the flat panels. And this is the design with the tilt and the gaps between the panels. And then this is just the original image that you can see the lattice from before. We don't have a new rendering with that tilt into it. And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
If that concludes your presentation, we'll open it to public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair House. If anyone in the audience would like to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker slip and turn it into me. While I'm waiting for that, I'll turn to virtual. If anyone participating virtually would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and also no one filling out a speaker slip, and we did not receive written correspondence. So with that, I'll turn it back to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. I will close public comment and open it to questions from the commission. Commissioner McClure.
I have a question. The power that you generate, what will that be used for?
So this system, I'm going to turn this actually to Christian because he's tracked this project from the very beginning.
Thank you for the question. The power from the solar panels will be served to serve the loads of the building. So both the parking structure, there are offices within the building that serve downtown parking, and there's the 911 call center in the building as well. These solar panels will be aggregated with the loads from the library across the street as well. So virtually, it will also power that building and show up on their bill. And it will be connected to a battery storage system in the basement of the parking garage, which will help serve resiliency and backup to the 911 call center.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Drury.
so in terms of what was approved on March 2nd, how much more visible is the new alignment?
Commissioner Drury, I would say negligibly more visible. The panels essentially have the same orientation. It's just adding that 5-degree tilt to the panels.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Commissioner Landvik.
Yes, I have a question. When we originally approved the trellis structure, we also commented, I believe, I didn't chase the minutes that far back today, but I believe we commented about exposed conduit and such on the perimeter walls, and I don't recall if we wanted the conduit concealed or what, but I noticed in trying to wade through the drawings today that there's a lot more equipment now associated with the system than was implied in it originally. So are you still able to conceal most of that equipment, the conduit to that equipment, or that's a question?
Yeah. Commissioner Landvik, I'm going to have Mr. Hoffland answer this question.
Thank you, Commissioner. Excellent question. I believe the set you are looking at now is a more complete permit set than the concept you originally saw. So there will be more details and more equipment shown within that set, but none of the designs have changed from what you'd originally seen. The conduit that will provide the power from the rooftop down to the batteries in the basement and ultimately connect to the electric room on the first floor will all be internal to the building. It will not be on the exterior whatsoever.
Okay.
It will be core drilled through the concrete or down through air vent shaft through the building. There will be conduit visible on the bottom side of the array that will connect the panels to the inverters and then back to the battery system and to the power of the building.
Are the batteries all inside the building?
Commissioner, yes, all the batteries are in the basement of the building.
I mean, I recall seeing 3 or 4, I guess 4 layers of use of the power. You know, the number 1 being the voltaic system, number 2 being Edison, number 3 being batteries, number 4 being a generator. Is there a generator associated with the project now that wasn't before?
Commissioner, thank you for the question. There is a large generator on site that powers the backup systems for the building. This system, the PV and battery system, will be tied into that with a new transfer switch, which will use the solar power and battery power before the generator is kicked on as a second set of resilience for the building.
Okay, so the generator is there now, and it's concealed, or whatever it is, it was prior approval.
Yes, sir. The battery is, the generator is about 20 years old. That is on the site, and it is concealed on the north side of the parking garage inside an enclosure.
Okay. Any other questions? I had one question, something you said towards the beginning. I just wanted to clarify. Has there been a change in state law? My understanding is we don't have purview over the solar panels themselves, but we do over the support structure. So has that changed?
And I can answer this too and kind of relieve you. But yes, that's changed. And we did a training for HLC back in when it's been a while. I can't remember when, but HLC did have a training where we invited sustainability and resilience staff to present, as well as the city attorney, Dan Henschke, was here as well. And just to update, so the state law has changed to where any of the support structures or anything supporting PV or electric vehicle charging stations is no longer, or can no longer be eligible for discretionary design review. All of those items are exempt. But as a courtesy, any city project we're coming back just to present information on that, but there's no decision or no action that the HLC can take.
I must have been absent at that meeting.
Makes two of us.
Can I ask for clarification?
Please do.
The supports are now beyond our purview because they are connected to the solar panels.
That's correct. So it was kind of, the support was a loophole to begin with. So this original project, the reason it triggered HLC review was because of the trellis structure, and that was considered under the purview, but the state law has changed. So any kind of support structure, whether it's a carport, a trellis, all of that is now exempt from discretionary design review.
A whole building?
Yeah.
No, it's not a whole building.
No, could you build a
The
whole
city attorney
building?
can draw a line, but certainly any kind of element like that. Or you'll see other things, the tiles that, or roofing tiles that incorporate PV into them. So there's just a whole list, and the state law expanded the definition for what is included in that, in those support structures and elements.
Okay, thank you for that.
Question, Chair House?
Yes.
Just following up on that also, would really appreciate, this project coming here voluntarily for our input. And does the city have, so thank you for that. And does the city have a general policy that we would encourage or want future projects like this to come to us, even though they would be not subject to anything we had to say?
Thank you for that question. In the previous presentation, city staff did commit to implementing best management practices to mitigate the visual impact of projects such as this and EV charging stations, and to work with planning staff to try to incorporate those elements when possible and feasible, and get their input on whether it would be working with staff or if it would be something that would be a separate working group or to come before the commission, depending on the scope and elements of the project. And correct me if that's wrong at all.
Are we going to jump into comments?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can open it up for comments.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you, and that I really am very excited about this project, and I have been all along. So I am thrilled to see it coming forth, totally support it, and looking forward to others that the city might take on. So thank you to the city of Santa Barbara. And I would hope that we could work together to, offer input that could help the project be better, even though we know that it's not enforceable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hansbrough.
I would like to echo that and just say that from when we first saw this project, this is a tremendous improvement. So we really appreciate and would encourage in the future working together to make them better projects. So thank you for that. So This is in progress review. There's no action required, so thank you very much for coming and explaining the changes.
Thank you very much for your time, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a State Street discussion, request from the commission to discuss and draft possible recommendations to council regarding the temporary conditions of State Street associated with the Economic Recovery Extension and Transition Ordinance. They like to come up with these long
They
things.
love acronyms.
ERETO, approved by council. The ERETO temporarily suspends municipal code regulations in order to allow outdoor dining and outdoor business uses in the public right-of-way or on private property. The ERETO will remain in effect until December 31st of this year when it sunsets. Staff?
And yes, so I do want to just point out that we have Sarah Clark here, and who will be saying a couple of words. And I don't know if Mr. Bossy will be here, or he's on his way. On his way.
Oh.
Okay, so we will have a couple of updates.
keep talking.
I'm going to keep. I'll fill. I have plenty of things that I could fill. But I just want to acknowledge that, as you all are well aware, there's a master plan for State Street. We're really not getting into that world. That's a separate discussion. The State Street Advisory Committee, a separate process. But currently, we're operating under this ERETO ordinance, which is set to sunset at the December 31st. We're going to have Brian Bossy here and then Sarah Clark to just go through kind of the most recent updates of what's been happening. But Chair House, in Chair Grumbine's absence, will be helping to facilitate a discussion. And so we do have some words from Chair Grumbine that he shared, and he brought some images, but we're really hoping to facilitate a discussion to really get at some of the interim situation, because we really don't know what's going to happen after December 31st and how long is interim. So this was really the desire of Chair Grumbine to kind of stimulate some discussion and kind of recognizing that HLC didn't really have too much of a bite of the apple with the creation of these emergency ordinances. So it's really to kind of package up a communication to council. And as the mayor mentioned at the very beginning of our meeting today, that City Council will be discussing this next Tuesday, so the 27th. And Chair Grumbine has maybe asked, appointed, or Commissioners Howes and Ensberg to hopefully collect the communication from today and to be able to share that with City Council next week, kind of as much of kind of words and thoughts to kind of put in their minds as they have to make policy decisions moving forward. And maybe before we get into Chair Grumbine's information in the discussion, I'd like to invite Sarah and Brian, if you want to give your updates on what's been going on most recently.
Chair House.
Yeah.
And Ms. Kokenda, just for clarification, this document is from Chair Grumbine?
Yes.
That is
Okay.
correct.
It doesn't have a name on it, so
I'm-
I wasn't sure.
And at some point, would you like me to read that introduction into the record for the benefit of those?
That would be either Ms. Rydell can do it or you can do it. I think it might be more appropriate if you want to do it. And just so that we're kind of the members of the public and the commission and everybody watching kind of collectively understands what the intention of this is.
Should I do that first or after?
I would say after staff update.
Hello, staff.
Hello, HLC. My name is Brian Bossy, and I'm the downtown manager with Public Works. And I'm here with,
My name is Sarah Clark. I'm the Downtown Plaza and Parking Manager.
and we're happy to give you an update. Actually, a lot of the things I was going to touch on are in Mr. Grumbine's letter. I guess first and foremost, again, Sarah and myself, as well as our teams, are responsible for the interim operations on State Street. Just to clarify, interim operations are essentially the last 3 years, and going forward, I don't think anybody really knows, but probably a few more years, 2 to 5 possibly, once the master plan gets approved, and it's going to take some time to design and implement and fund and all that. So we are looking at a number of years ahead of us. So that is our role. We are responsible for the day-to-day operations, the maintenance, the cleaning, and things of that nature. So along those lines, first and foremost, we continue to enforce ADA accessibility requirements on the parklets. I believe at this point, we're in 100% compliance with all of the parklets on State Street. I know they're not parklets per se in the architectural way, streeteries, if you will. I'm not sure what, but they've come to be known as parklets, so that's the phrasing I'm going to use as well. So we continue to enforce ADA. We are also, back in May, started charging a rate for use of that public space. And we are currently going through that process. That required an application review. As part of that, they have to meet the design requirements that council adopted back in January. And so we are going through that process. And I think only have a few who haven't submitted yet. So we are working with these folks to get their applications in, review them, make sure everything's up to speed, and then they will be required to start paying from May 1st on. So we're working through that process. We do have, let's see, as far as bikes are concerned, that's been a little slower than we had anticipated or wanted, but we, as everybody else, have definite staffing issues. So we, I believe, just met last week again on a possible pilot program design. Once we get something a little bit more concrete, if you will, we can review that. I believe we've been reviewing it with Ms. Ensberg as well as Mr. Grumbine, and get their take on that as well, their input. So that continues to move forward, albeit slower, and that's on me. Sorry about that. As far as, what else do we have here? So that's the bikes, parklets. Am I forgetting it? I know I am. Oh, yeah. So that's, yeah, no. Yeah, geez, okay, I'm not even close. We have also, as a pilot program, installed, and this is also Mr. Grumman's comments, some Adirondack chairs and tables, kind of like a little outdoor living room in a few locations up and down State Street, just monitoring how those are being used. So that's part of another pilot program that we're working on as far as activation. And I am sorry, but there is I forgot this. Next Tuesday, there will be a discussion at City Council. We are looking to get some guidance and possibly some decisions on the temporary parklets that were part of the Economic Recovery Extension and Transition Ordinance, which was put into play a number of years ago. That ordinance expires December 31st of this year. And so there are kind of three main areas that we're looking to get some guidance and possible decisions on. One is what to do with State Street, as far as the promenade is concerned, generally the 4 through 1300 blocks and those outdoor business facilities. We are also looking at what direction council wants to take as far as parklets on private property, so primarily in the Funk Zone and a lot of other places, but that's, I think, that what comes to people's minds first. And then lastly, parklets in the public right-of-way off of State Street, so whether it's Ortega, Coast Village Road, the Mesa, so anywhere where they are using public right-of-way to put out a parklet. So we will be talking with them about that on Tuesday. A number of you were at the meeting yesterday. Thank you very much for attending the public forum. A lot of good input. It was very well attended. So we're thankful for that. So that'll all be processing. We'll be processing that and putting that into our council agenda report. I should also note that if you weren't available to go to that meeting or would like your opinion heard, we do have a survey that was sent out, and I believe we're approaching about 4,000 responses as of today. So as you can imagine, everybody has input, and we're glad to try and process that all and move forward with council and give them some possible options as to how to move forward.
Thank you very much.
Gets it.
Does that conclude your presentation?
As far as I know, yes.
Do we need to go to public comment now, or, okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair House. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and fill a speaker slip and then turn it into me. While I wait for that, I'll go ahead and turn to virtual participation. If anyone joining on Zoom would like to speak on the item, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands, and actually, I have one raised hand for Sharon Rich. Sharon, I'm going to go ahead and send you a unmute request. Please unmute, and you'll have 2 minutes to talk.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak today. I am calling regarding the ERTO, and I would like the HLC to consider recommending extending the ARETO to align with the existing State Street Master Plan process timeline. Let's give Tess Harris and her team and consultants the opportunity to finish what they started. The community has clearly stated that a pedestrian-friendly promenade on State Street is desired, and while there's no design yet, there will be. Many of the elements that HLC want are being discussed as part of that master plan. But to do anything before that plan process is completed would be a disservice to the businesses on State Street and a waste of taxpayer money. What the HLC recommends to the city matters, the citizens matter, and our communities matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do not have any more raised hands and currently no speaker slips. We did receive written correspondence from Paulina Kahn, which was distributed to the commissioner prior to the meeting. With that, I'll hand it back to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. I will close public comment.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Drury.
Do we know who just spoke?
She gave her name, but
Their name was Sharon Rich.
Sharon Rich.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
She's the if you don't mind, sorry.
Not at all.
She's the executive director of Friends of State Street.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, next I would like to read the introduction in Chair Grumbine's letter. He says, since I am not able to attend this HLC meeting, and since I had originally asked for this topic be discussed and addressed by the HLC, I was wondering if you could pass along the following notes, questions, comments for discussion and consideration by HLC members. This upcoming Tuesday, City Council is meeting to discuss the interim plan of State Street. It would seem both useful, very appropriate, and quite helpful for HLC to provide guidance regarding the interim plan, since the economic, aesthetic, and historic well-being of the EPV are the established responsibility, per the city charter, of the HLC. And since the interim plan will have a very long-ranging impact on the EPV, as it may be 5 to 10 years before the master plan will be realized. To that end, and since HLC never had the chance, for emergency reasons, to do its proper job over 3 years ago, it seems very important that HLC now give constructive guidance for the next time period, until the long-range plans can be realized. With that in mind, I would suggest that my fellow HLC members work together to give their best thoughts and suggestions to help make Santa Barbara more beautiful and successful of a city. And I would like to add to that I personally think that we should exclude bikes from this discussion, because I don't see how that is the purview of the HLC. It's not an aesthetic, architectural, et cetera, and it could double the length of this discussion. So does anybody disagree with that?
I don't disagree.
I don't disagree.
Okay. All right. So, I guess next is to open it to questions from the commission.
If I may, Chair House, just to let you know that Chair Grumbine provided photos, and that might be helpful just to have some images to react to as there are some questions that come up about certain things. So we have
Do you
these.
want to run through that first?
And it might be just, as just kind of a helpful preview, and then as we go through the topics, that, yes, it might just be a photo that you wish to concentrate on.
And as I'm running through these, please let me know if you'd like me to zoom in or go back to a previous photo, or just direct me however you will.
I'm assuming we've all looked at these.
These were not
No, the
provided
photos
to
were
the
not part
commission
of the
in
package.
Oh, I guess, I got an email from them and had all of them. Yeah, okay.
Privileges of being the vice chair.
I guess so. Doesn't happen often, but.
So just some examples of planters and some accessibility, additional outdoor dining and umbrellas in the public right-of-way. This kind of shows some of those planters at the intersection. I think this is probably more of kind of what people are saying. You can kind of get a sense being in the middle, give your perspective on looking at the buildings from the side. Again, kind of the intersections, bollards.
Formerly upright bollard.
Formerly, so, you know, sometimes they come down, but can go right back up. Some of the parklets that are existing in the public right-of-way.
And is that an off-State Street?
This
I'm
is
guessing?
off State Street. I believe this is in front of Aperitivo, which is right next to Oat Bakery on Haley. This is the,
Probably 400 block of State or something.
yeah, so again, some lighting. You can look at some of the lighting, again, outdoor dining, kind of fencing. Some additional parklets for retail, and again, just kind of notice pedestrians. I think this might have been before some of the restaurants opened up in the morning, perhaps. Additional planting, kind of barriers, seating arrangements. This is an example of some of the lighting that's, I don't know how many intersections, but I definitely know there's one at State and Gutierrez at that intersection overhead.
And even some cross streets.
Yeah, exactly. It's that at the cross street. I don't know. Staff might be able to weigh in on other locations. Okay, so those are the photos. So maybe, again, we can always pull if there's one in particular that you want to focus on, but I will.
Okay. Let me say that I'm not sure I see any point in separating questions from comments. I think we all understand what's before us, so maybe we just take comments and maybe take one section at a time, discuss that, maybe do a straw vote so we know if we're in agreement on something. and
Pardon
then-
my interruption, Mr. Chair. The staff before you has a limited amount of time that they're available for questions. So if you have any questions for these two in particular, I would
Do we
encourage
have
you
any
to ask them
questions
now.
for
I have
the
a question
president?
for
I do.
Brian.
Okay.
The guidelines appear to speak only to State Street. And why, so there's no control now over parklets that are off State Street?
When you say guidelines, you mean EPV guidelines? or-
Well, we got
Just parklet guidelines.
the parklet
okay,
guidelines.
yeah.
And, you know, the parklet guidelines.
Yeah.
So, not seeing any control off State Street concerns me a lot. And I guess that's one of the questions that's, the council probably wants some response on. But if there's no, if State Street is the only area which has benefited by way of COVID allowing parklets, but other businesses have done it as well, why aren't those other businesses required to get approval from ABR or Landmarks? Why are they exempt from the process? I mean, we talk about crosswalks, whether or not it's brick or tile. I mean, we have all that kind of involvement, but we are seeing parklets off State Street that have no control through.
Chair House, Commissioner Lenvik, great questions. So as you recall, when the first emergency ordinances went into effect, the idea was to get them all businesses some help. So a lot of that design review process, all of it was set aside. And so that is still being governed through this Economic Recovery Extension and Transition Ordinance, the ERETO, which expires at the end of this year. So through that process, council via the State Street Interim Operations Ad Hoc Subcommittee focused just on State Street as far as making design requirements. So originally, there are design guidelines. They're both for State Street as well as parklets off of State Street. However, back in January, council solidified and made those, took a lot of those guidelines and made them into requirements. But again, just for State Street. And so part of the discussion on Tuesday regarding the future of these temporary parklets off of State Street is going to be just what you mentioned, design and things like that, because they are just guidelines right now. They don't have to do it. We encourage them to do it, and so that would be, if council decides that they want to move forward with a more permanent program, that's going to definitely have to be something they need to discuss.
So has council said by ordinance or whatever that any parklets that are not on State Street are exempt from design review? Have they said that officially? I can go someplace and read that?
Mr. Lenvik, I believe that would be through the various emergency ordinances that have been enacted since March of 2020. It would come through those legal vehicles, if you will.
Does that answer your question?
No, it does not. But I didn't, what it's telling me is I got to go and look through a lot of prior actions of the council to see if in fact the council has said, you on East Victoria Street, whatever restaurants are there, or like this, you don't have to get approvals. I mean, what I'm learning is I've got to go and find that myself.
So were they ever specifically exempted from guidance from?
My understanding is that when this took effect back in March of 2020, that the enacting ordinance suspended all design review for all of these, whether it be State Street or off of State Street.
And that's my understanding as well.
Okay, all right.
And so that has just continued when, there was a time where it was an emergency, couldn't be called an emergency, so they moved into another, and so now we're in economic recovery, not an emergency situation, which ends at the end
Today,
of.
what we're discussing is adding a new layer of review, or at least guidelines on parklets, which could apply uniformly to State Street and off State Street.
If we want.
If that's what we decide to do.
That's your discussion point, sure.
Yeah, okay.
If, Mr. Chair, if I could build on that discussion, I think that at this preliminary stage, one of the things we can do is to identify key principles that would become the basis for decision-making. And one of the first items on Chair Grombein's list was parklets. And I think that one of the principles is that parklets are subject to regulation because they are substantial solid structures on the street with undeniable impacts on circulation and aesthetics. And I would then go a little bit further and say one principle should be that all parklets in the city should be regulated. There may be a separate set of regulations for parklets in the EPV. That would be to be determined. But the principle would be that if it's a parklet, to use that word, that it is subject to regulation.
Okay. And Commissioner Ensberg, you had comments?
I just had a quick
Or question.
question just before we move on. And I agree that I think the best we can do right now is to kind of give a big picture. But my clarification is, my understanding is, number one, we have two things going on. We have a master plan, which is an opportunity to dive into a lot of very, very complicated stuff. That's why we have a master plan, right? Okay. And the master plan, my question is, my understanding is that it includes the full, not just State Street. The master plan is for the full central business district from Anacapa, well, maybe not the full district, but from Chapala to Anacapa and from Gutierrez to Sola. Is that true or false?
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Tess Harris. I'm the State Street Master Planner for the city. Yes, so the State Street Master Plan project area goes from where you indicated, from Sola to the underpass, and then Chapala to Anacapa Street. So while we focus, a lot of the focus has been on State Street, those zero blocks is what we call them. Those blocks in between Chapala and Anacapa are also included.
Thank you. So that leads into my next question. Did you want to?
Well, I want to interrupt her because if that is a boundary of State Street, why aren't those side streets, East and West Victoria, Anacapa, whatever, why aren't they part of the parklet control?
Is that
Commissioners, so I will let staff speak on that piece, on the ERETO piece, but ultimately that'll be a decision of council next Tuesday, is whether, whether they continue efforts solely on State Street, if they continue parklets throughout the city, if they decide to do it within the master plan project area. I mean, there's a number of different options that councils could take.
So thank you. If I could ask my second question. So that's very helpful to know that, and I think that's part of our discussion, in my mind anyway, is how also addressing the paseos and other pieces of our downtown that are not directly on State Street. So thank you for that clarification. And this leads to the other question, which is my understanding is this whole word parklet has really made all of us, I think, kind of crazy, because if you look at the definition of it, it's one thing, but I believe, and so tell me if I'm right here, that when we speak of State Street, we're talking about outdoor dining in the street. When we speak about the side streets, we call them parklets because they are in the former parking space typically. So is that right, that we call them one thing in one area and but everybody just calls them parklets now, and now I guess the understanding is that you really can't eat outside unless you have a parklet, but, which I don't believe is true. But can you just clarify that for us? Thank you.
So Chair House, Commissioner Ensberg, I'll take that question. So right now there are two different sets of regulations. So there is State Street, which is the requirements for operating a business on the temporary State Street promenade, and then there are the parklets, which are off State Street. Generally, the term parklet has come to mean just any sort of on-street expansion of dining in particular, but really it could be any business use. But sort of the way that we ended up here is that the parklets are on streets that are still open to traffic, and so those have different design and building requirements than on State Street, where they can be larger, for example, and they have kind of a different set of requirements. So that's how we ended up with these two sort of separate sets of guidelines. And to the bigger point, all of these things right now are currently temporary uses. They are all authorized under the ERETO, which expires at the end of the year. So that includes, number one, the closure of the State Street Promenade to vehicle traffic. It includes the authorization to have on-street business facilities or outdoor business facilities on State Street. It includes the authorization to have parklets off of State Street in the public right-of-way, and it includes the authorization to expand on-site dining on private property into other spaces such as the parking lot. So all of those uses, these temporary uses, end at the end of this year. And so the question that we're taking to council is about what is going to come after that, since we've had 3+ years of temporary uses, and so now it's thinking about what the next steps are. So those are sort of the series of questions that are in front of council in terms of looking at the future. And when we talk about parklets versus the outdoor business facilities, that's kind of how that distinction was originally made, because we do have a separate set of regulations for ones on streets that are open to traffic versus not open to traffic. So I hope that has answered your question.
No, that's great. Thank you. And could you also clarify, we do have existing an ordinance for anyone who wants to apply to have dining, outdoor dining on the public sidewalk. We do have an ordinance that way that people can do that, as we had pre-COVID, correct?
That is correct. It's the Outdoor Dining License Agreement Program, the ODLA, which has been in effect for well over 2 decades.
Okay.
And that is on,
And
that
we
is on
have-
sidewalks.
So that's an opportunity, so once the ERETO expires, this would still be available for anyone who wanted to have now and in the future. If they would like to have dining on the sidewalk, they could apply for that.
Commissioner Ensberg, yes and no. Yes, it will continue. It's been a very successful program. The ability to have outdoor dining on your sidewalk frontage depends on space requirements, ADA access. So there are a number of factors involved. You generally, for the most part, it's predominantly along State Street. You have wider sidewalks, but there is possibly the opportunity in other locations, depending on width of sidewalk, where planters are, where light posts are, that you could squeeze in
Sure.
additional outdoor dining, especially through this process. I think we've all come to realize, the public has come to realize the joy of outdoor dining, and they would like to see that continue. So it might expand in that sense, where people are more tuned into it now. But yes, it's a program that's been in effect for a few decades and is going to continue.
And where do we find that? Is that easy to find on the city website? Is it called something?
It should be. It's run through the Public Works Department, and it's the Outdoor Dining License Agreement Program. The ODLA is what we call it.
ODLA, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
If nobody else has questions, do you have questions?
I don't have questions.
Okay. Staff is free to go if you would like.
Are we
I
continuing
wouldn't want to
comments?
hang out here.
Yes,
We will.
Yeah,
He requested that we direct
You got a tough
questions
job.
first.
Thank you. Doing it.
Yes,
Thank you
indeed.
for doing it.
Hopefully you enjoyed your time here today.
We were civil.
We have a short 4-question survey for you.
Decorum is paramount, right?
Oh, yes, exactly.
Mr. Chair, may I just ask a question?
Certainly.
You took bikes off the table,
Yes,
and the reason is?
because we don't like bikes on the table.
Okay.
One question about that, Mr. Chair.
Well, wait a sec, let's finish that thought.
So I just wondered why.
Because I don't see that it has a connection to our purview. It's not an aesthetic or architectural, et cetera, and it could take a lot of time, and we have 15 minutes until our next agenda item, so I want to try and move things along. Okay. Let's see, so I would suggest we take each of these separately and have a discussion about it and come up with thoughts, take a straw poll if need be, and then staff, what do you have to say about
Yes,
that?
and I would like to ask the chair to open up public comment. We have City Council Member Sneddon here who would wish to
Is
just.
that out of order? Can we do that?
You can do this as the chair.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want.
I will
so,
reopen public comment.
Thank you.
Yes,
And I think this will help clarify what would be helpful.
okay.
Thank you, and thank you for the latitude. Was confused between questions and comments and melded.
Yeah.
I really want to say how much I appreciate HLC and your input and how much care and guidance you give, particularly in this very sensitive area. And as was mentioned, your input was circumnavigated for several years now, and I can sense that there's a lot of pent-up frustration about past, but I really will need on Tuesday, I think council will need very clear direction about the future. So if I could ask just for myself, for council, clear direction on whether we will even have a outdoor dining in public spaces program or not, aside from what's already in place. That's a question, a yes or no. And then to Mr. Dordenek, I was going to say council member, committee member, Commissioner Dorden, your comments about the principles, very, very helpful, but also the yes, no question about the 3 different places. So I think covered State Street, but there's also in the parking spaces that are on the street, but there are over 90, I think, or somewhere around that number, facilities throughout the city, and a lot of them include areas like the Funk Zone and parking lots that aren't city parking lots. So it'll be especially helpful if there's very clear input on those 3 different types of programs that we may or may not continue or have a more HLC-informed process about. But I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one other request to speak, and that is from Robin Elander.
Thank you so much for reopening public comment since I was running in the door a little bit late, so I appreciate it. My name's Robin Elander. I'm the Executive Director for Downtown Santa Barbara, and I just wanted to make a quick comment on this topic. I really appreciate all of your support and input along the way with this process. I did want to share that as it relates to outdoor dining is a really significant economic generator for our community, not just downtown, but throughout the community. And so I really would encourage you to find a way through design to be able to continue this process throughout our city. It has shown to be able to support not only the restaurants, but also the neighboring areas, and to create vitality in that area. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was part of the conversation as you consider whether you continue State Street outdoor dining as well as the side streets downtown and throughout the rest of the city, including in the parking lots as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there's no other public comment, then I will close public comment and open it to discussion from the commission. And do you agree we should take these one at a time and get the big guy parklets out of the way first?
It's your meeting.
Okay, well, no, I'd like
Okay.
to
Well,
have consensus.
we can try it.
Yes.
But I think that
I
we
agree.
may,
Okay.
And I think that we should keep good record of what we're agreeing on so that we can give clear direction, or clear comments to the city council with regard to these various items.
Yeah, and that's-
We can't be wishy-washy.
That's where straw polls might come in handy
That's
to
right.
kind of see if it's the feeling of the entire.
Yes, to the chair, through the chair to Commissioner Lenvik. Yes, at the very end, I would encourage the chair to summarize all of the comments made, so we have a package that's included in the minutes that you and Commissioner Ensberg can take to City Council, and then straw polls as necessary will also be captured in the minutes.
And just another question, general question. Maybe we should discuss first if we're in general agreement that the ERETO should be extended.
If I may, I would hold that and really focus on the elements. And Chair, when I talked to Chair Grumbine about this and kind of what would a facilitated discussion look like, it's so much of this can be led by kind of the pros and cons and reactions to what's happened. So these photos are really meant to kind of stimulate that thought. And we've already seen the experiments with the ERETO and kind of your reactions to them of what's working, what's not working. And then Chair Grumbine has specific bullet points here to kind of stimulate some thought. So I think we could maybe pull up some of those images. Again, you all react to them, but I think I would, I think as HLC discusses it, it will kind of shed light on what do you all have consensus on, or kind of what is that? And does that fall in line with the ERETO and the current policies? Is that something different? So I think that's just my suggestion to the commission.
All righty. Commissioner Jordan, you had.
If I have a couple of comments that I hope move the conversation along. The first one is to make a distinction between outdoor dining and the large permanent structures that are now being called parklets, and to say you can be in favor of one without necessarily being in favor of the other. There are many cities that have outdoor dining and so forth. Next, that on the issue of the regulation of parklets, are we covering all large permanent structures called parklets, or only some in the city? A distinction that I think is important to this group is that the EPV, the distinctive architectural character of the EPV is central to the city for reasons we can all enumerate. Therefore, any large permanent structure in the EPV, not just on State Street, should be regulated by the HLC and should comply with the materiality, the color palettes, and the lighting that is typical of EPV. So that these are decisions to be made along the way, but just some distinctions that can be made also.
Chair Grumbine? Chair House. Yeah, I feel like there's kind of, I appreciate what Commissioner Jordan just said, and I think there's kind of this bigger picture thing that needs to happen. And I feel that where we're getting confused is that this is extremely complicated. There's so many things, and that is why we have a master plan, is to delve into the huge complexity of all of this. And so what do we do now? So we have to separate those two things. We have an issue right now of a situation that's on State Street, and whether or not we want to continue that, or whether or not that is just too complex of an issue to get into all of this minutia, and that maybe some of those items are more appropriately put to the master plan for a greater discussion. So one of the things that was stated just a few minutes ago was that there's a survey going out right now about the existing condition. So to me, that's like opening it all up to a whole lot of discussion and a lot of input from the community about something which really, to me, is the master plan, because you've got every opinion known to man. Everybody has a different opinion. So I feel that we need to make a clear decision about the situation right now, that we should say, coming from our position as HLC commissioners responsible for this space, and then whatever these giant discussions need to be, that needs to be part of the master plan. That is my.
Somebody needs to kick it off and suggest what they think should happen, and then we see who agrees with that. or has,
Mr.
different
Chair.
opinions.
Okay.
Is that Commissioner Drury?
Mr. Chair. Well, I'm in favor of getting rid of all the parklets. If our EPV strictures talk about the architectural character of State Street itself, those are completely obscuring some really lovely buildings. And I think that there's a way to handle outdoor dining without parklets. I think the extension of the sidewalk all the way across the same level, I think former Mayor Lodge brought that up at the library meeting we had some months ago.
But that's a master plan objective.
But we're still talking about what to do in general, right? I mean, this is.
But the raising of the street is.
Well, okay, so get rid of the parklets, extend the awnings, and I think probably do something about the sidewalks, because the plantings, some of that will probably have to go if you're going to have sidewalk dining. But I know that there's an ordinance about the awning size, is that correct? Or is that not part of the?
Yeah, it's partly building code, I think. And partly,
Okay, so anyway, I think the parklets have served their purpose. I think more sober heads will agree with me. No, I don't know. But I think that the parklets served their purpose when the time came, and the time has passed, and I think they need to go. That's
Okay, there's one opinion.
That's one opinion.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Uli.
I want to support my Commissioner Jordan in the sense that we should focus on broad principles that help to guide the decision-making process rather than worry about, is it brown, is it green, is it orange, is it big, is it small? And to me, I think of these parklets not as parklets because that's a misnomer. They are structures in the street. And it seems to me the day for those has come and gone. If you wanted my honest opinion about it, I think we should just revert back to what we had before the pandemic. Because, I don't know, maybe I've got 25 good years left, and I'm pessimistic that anything related to a master plan will come to fruition before I'm dead. It just takes too long in this city to get stuff done. Now, that's not a popular opinion. And so I realize that the part of the equation is the economic engine that helps the business owners in this town make a living. And if that is outdoor dining, then I suggest that we keep outdoor dining but get rid of all the structures. As a premise going forward after the 31st of December, you can have outdoor dining wherever you want on State Street, given certain parameters and conditions, but no structures. What happens on the side streets is a slightly complicated little thing because their sidewalks aren't big enough to accommodate this kind of thing, and so you have a, quote, parklet structure, unquote, and I suggest that those probably should be allowed in a very controlled situation so that they're not subject to getting a lack of a benefit that another business owner might be getting. But with these principles about how these things should be done, it should give council and staff enough guidance to craft the regulating rules that make it happen.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Butler.
Exactly. The word structure, I actually wrote it down too. I felt that's what we're trying to deal with here. I would eliminate all structures. No question about it. So that means eliminating parklets, fine, whatever we call parklets. It's the structures that have been created that are obstructionist, block views, block sidewalks, access, safety, et cetera. So, and it, both having frequented State Street and looked at other examples around the world, very seldom do you see these structures built to contain dining. Very seldom, not exclusively. So I would support that absolutely.
Commissioner Jordan.
On this, another principle that I would put out is the status ante. What was there before COVID is the default, and that anything new has to be justified, rather than saying what's there now as a result of ERETO is the default. Rather, the default is what was there before COVID.
Including vehicles?
Yes, yes. And so anything new or changes, that's what has to be justified.
I would agree with that.
Commissioner Lenvick.
Yes, I would agree with that as well. I think that, in particular, no overhead structures should be allowed as part of outside dining. Outside dining is encouraged, no problem. Structures are not. Secondly, I don't think any built surroundings or enclosures of the outside dining should be allowed. Planters with landscape material can enclose that dining area if the person chooses, but not structures that are put together with nails and screws. It just should not allow that. So I agree, yeah. I don't know that, I agree with the comments that we should recommend to the council that we go back to where it was before COVID. In other words, cars and bikes taking care of themselves on the street. I'm for that. I'm not sure that we would not have a revolution, however, if that occurred, but I certainly am for that. But we've got to get rid of these huge, ugly overhead structures, yes.
I'd have to change my identity.
Commissioner McClure is next.
Yeah, I agree with the no structure concept. If you look at the picture that's up on the screen now, I could be supportive of that simple dark deck structure coming out 8 feet or so, and it would have a design standard to it, and then I could picture an umbrella or 2 or 3 coming out of that deck and some metal tables. And that's about as far as I could see it going. That's my thought. No handrails. I would say no heaters, just simple little deck extension for ADA, some wire tables, some wire furniture, and some umbrellas, and that's it.
Commissioner Ansberg, did you have something to add?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the default. I think that is what is on the books approved. We did a temporary measure, just like if we had a big rainstorm and we had a leaky roof, we'd throw a big plastic tarp over it, and then when the rain stopped, we'd take it off. We've left this on for 3 years. So I think we need to default back to where we were before. And I think that there's some assumptions that, yes, it was a great move. It was a good thing to do. It was an emergency, and many, many businesses did do very, very well. But we did lose a lot of businesses, and we weren't able to do that full discussion, which is what we're doing now with the master plan. So I encourage this work, this difficult and complex work, to be continued, and that we refrain from, getting into all of that. Absolutely 100% support outdoor dining. It has nothing to do with the name Parklet. Outdoor dining we've had for forever, and we will have forever. So I absolutely support that, and I would encourage for now, right now, that there's plenty, they can do it on the sidewalks and apply for this OPLA and put them on the sidewalks. I would also encourage that we allow the removal of some of the overgrown planted areas to maximize the, I think this is something we could do now that would be pretty easy to remove those overgrown areas, keep all the street trees, and then fill them in with bricks so that we have the maximum usable area on the sidewalk. If that's not a big master plan thing, I would encourage council to move forward and allow something like that to happen. And also to allow retractable awnings for the restaurants so that they can put their outdoor dining right next to their establishment and make the most bang for the buck by having a beautiful awning there and nice furniture arranged that draws the attention of people to their establishment and will help to, market them. So I would like to see that as well. And as far as the street, going back to our pre-COVID, just remember there are things about how the street was used that have a lot to do with accessibility. People who can't walk or ride a skateboard would often, just for the enjoyment of cruising down the street, their only option would be to be in a car. So that is I feel that that's an important accessibility thing. That's why I keep talking about the trolley and wanting the trolley to come back. But I know that's expensive, and it's not really part of our purview. But it does have to do with the use of the street. So I think the best bet is for us to revert back to what we had on the books before and help people have beautiful outdoor dining next to their restaurant, smaller so that it's more equally distributed around the entire downtown for everyone to benefit. And then let's keep hashing out all of these issues in the master plan.
Well, I would say I am thoroughly confused, and this seems clear as mud to me. When we talk about reverting to the way it was, that was with cars. And so if we revert to cars, then there's no room for accessible ramps up to the curb and stuff like that. So there won't be any dining in the street area. And as far as the outdoor dining, you're required to provide a certain amount of clear sidewalk width. So you can't go expanding a bunch more than it already allowed by filling in planters and stuff. So I don't see we're going to gain much in the way of additional seating. So it will be the way it was before COVID, and with cars, and the trolley will come back because the street will be open. So that's where I'm not clear. Do we want to allow some partial outdoor dining that's greater than what was allowable before, or, and I'm hearing from Commissioner McClure, little raised patios like that for accessible dining would be acceptable, but that can't be the case if there are vehicles in the street. So discuss.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Drury.
So if we are going to get rid of the parklets, then I think the direction we would like to see City Council pursue is to expand the sidewalks to the curb, the existing curb, and eliminate some of the plantings and extend the awnings to make it possible to eat outside during really hot days, really rainy days. I remember you spoke about the ordinance itself. It was rather short in terms of the shelter that can be given by an awning, but that can be changed by an ordinance change. So I
Not
think
if
that-
it's a building code issue, so that has
Yeah.
to be
Oh,
researched.
okay. But I think that the idea, if you're going to get rid of the park list, then you would encourage the powers that be to expand the outdoor dining ability of the sidewalks by just eliminating some of the plantings, at least, and extending the awnings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's achievable. But
I don't either.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Uli.
I see it as an A or a B. A would be revert to pre-COVID conditions, and the various programs that were already on the books to allow sidewalk dining would govern.
And that means allowing traffic back on the street.
Correct. Pre-COVID conditions. So that's A. Personally, that's my preference, but I don't believe that's very popular among the community. So I might have to change my address or get,
Definitely.
have a plastic mask
You
on
might
or
be
something.
surprised, though.
So, I'm just saying that might not be the popular approach. Plan B would be to continue the ERETO and allow uses that are currently on the street to continue, but eliminate the structures and simplify the streetscape.
When you say eliminate the structures. does that-
Vertical structures.
Okay, and so platforms.
A platform
okay, but-
would be okay because you got to deal with accessibility and that kind of a
ADA
thing. And
compliance.
just eliminate the vertical stuff. And however the low horizontal stuff is dealt with, whether it's a metal railing or a planter or whatever that is, create guidelines that provide how you should solve that problem.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Commissioner Jordan.
What it sounds like is that that's a suggestion about simplification of what exists. And the other issue about the ERETO expiring at the end of this year, I wonder if there is a way to align ERETO with the projected timeline for the State Street Master Plan to be delivered by MIGS, so that you could extend it to match or align with that project timeline, which is a public stated timeline. If the issue is what to do on December the 31st.
Mr. Chair, the master plan, as someone said yesterday in the meeting, could easily be 7 years away or more. And it's entirely possible that the master plan never could come to fruition.
Just like Delegara Plaza.
Once you figure out what it's going to cost and how you're going to fund it, I don't mean to insult the staff who's worked for their life on this, but once you figure out the cost and how it's going to be funded, and how the little old ladies on Outer State Street or in Riviera or wherever are going to pony up the dollars for this, it may not happen. So we've got to deal with the parklets or whatever, the structures that are there today, as opposed to waiting for 7 years or 8 years or whatever to maybe have them go away. I would not bet that I'll be alive when the master plan comes to fruition.
A lot of us are thinking about dying. It seems.
Hey, I'm not going there.
But the question, one of the other questions the staff, the council would like to hear on is, what are our recommendations regarding outside dining on private property? We should certainly encourage it, but I believe that it has to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, loss of parking spaces, or its prior approvals on parking spaces. It has to obviously comply with handicap accessibility. I think it maybe should apply the restroom requirements for a restaurant should be met as if that number of tables were on the inside. I mean, we should not ignore the current regulations and ordinances that we have merely to accommodate outside dining. if outside dining is so valuable, the people that want to do it will have to solve that problem. Parking spaces, restrooms, accessibility, so on and so forth.
Well, I think just for the fact that most places don't have more parking spaces than they were required to have, I think basically you're saying eliminate outdoor dining.
Well, in this day and age, parking, a lot of parking is going away, and projects are being approved with less parking than is required. That maybe is the planning commission or an appeal agency that, in the city, that would allow to have a reduction in parking. But I don't believe that merely because you are wanting to increase your income by way of putting outside tables and chairs, that you can get rid of the parking and other aspects of health, safety, and welfare. It makes no sense.
I like awnings.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Chair. Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Uli.
I would just add on to that, that reverting back to pre-pandemic conditions means that all of the rules that we've spent a whole lot of time putting in place are now in effect. And an emergency order that has expired globally is no reason to set aside those rules. And we shouldn't arbitrarily set them aside because everybody likes the way it is now. Under a lawless community, we should revert back to the rules that are in place. So I support what Commissioner Lindbeck's saying.
Chair.
Commissioner Ensberg.
Thank you. I agree with that statement again, and I wanted to just reemphasize that, you know, there may end up being, we may end up, when we go through this master plan, we could very well end up with structures in the street. We don't know. We have no idea where it's going to go. We may end up with structures that are designed beautifully to be in the middle of the street. We may end up with a street that gets raised, or maybe we leave it where it is. All of these things are very, as I said, extremely complicated, and the issues that Commissioner Lenvik has brought up, you know, there's health and safety regulations right now that are just, you know, regarding food and beverage and delivery of food and beverage and the sizes of the kitchens, the sizes of the bathrooms. All of that stuff is the, you know, the nitty-gritty stuff that isn't the fun stuff to talk about. Everybody's talking about the fun stuff of eating and drinking in the street. So I'm just saying, we aren't saying that we don't want to have this, any of these things. We want to have the discussion and talk it through and decide as a community where we're going to go. That's the purpose of the master plan, which I'm
Yeah, but
sorry.
you're saying, from what I'm hearing, until that master plan is completed, we're eliminating outdoor dining as we know
No,
it
we're not
now.
eliminating it at all. We are saying the outdoor dining has to go per the regulations that we currently have on the books, which
Well,
is the
As
OD.
we know it now is what I'm saying, so with
Right,
platforms
as we know it
extending out
now,
into the street.
those would not be allowed. But you would be allowed, and perhaps what we could do to be helpful is to look at the outdoor dining, the ODLA, and just see what exactly is there and what we could do to make it, you know, more conducive and helpful to, in parking lots or wherever else they might be. But they need to all be designed and approved in a particular, you know, and there may be several options for design. It doesn't have to be rigid, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm agreeing that we should, until we can talk it all out, we have really, in my mind, not a choice but to put it back to the way it was before, and then we work out, and then go through the process of approving a new way of doing things.
Well, that seems to be the majority opinion. I would say I am in the minority here, and I would prefer a more incremental approach, and there was a very excellent suggestion, I thought, made at the workshop yesterday, which was get rid of the superstructure. You know, that's what's blocking view of the building, and your eye is drawn to the crappiness of those. And if they were just, you know, a low wall or something, I didn't have an objection to that. But it sounds like the majority of this commission would prefer entirely remove these structures and go back to the way it was before, but I'm still not clear if you're wanting to restore traffic until a decision is made.
Mr. Chair, can I make a recommendation?
Please.
That we return to the agenda, postpone this discussion until the end of the meeting, if the staff can allows us to do that, so that we don't hold up all the people in the audience who maybe
Because we
aren't.
could be another hour discussing this.
Well, order pizza.
Pizza.
Well, it'll force us to make a decision if we put it off till the end of the
I
meeting.
think I'm a little concerned because staff, from a staffing standpoint, and not being able to have additional people as resources, including myself.
Yeah.
Can we
And,
do
uh,
a straw poll to see where people are at, or are we still like all over the place?
I don't know that we're all over the place. I think I'm the only one that holds a minority opinion.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Butler first.
So I think the fellow commissioner made a good comparison, A or B.
Right.
I go B. How's that?
And B is, what do you
Is,
define
let's,
that?
B is eliminate the structures, maybe there's some other modifications or regulations, but we don't reopen the street to cars, we don't revert back to 100% pre-COVID conditions.
Is that-
It's more in line with, I think you were thinking, and that is,
It's a step further, it's all
Yeah.
of these.
And Mr. Chair, my original,
Hold on a sec, I
Oh,
just
pardon
want to
me.
confirm, is that
Yeah.
an adequate explanation of your
Yes.
viewpoint? Okay.
Plan B.
Commissioner Drury.
well, I agree with you.
With me.
It's the superstructures that get in the way of the architecture.
Yeah.
A fenced-off area and I think a street devoid of traffic except for pedestrians would be my choice.
Plan B.
Well, I think that let's take a straw poll on Plan A versus Plan B, and then we know how many support each.
Well, why can't we say, council, we have a recommendation that A, default, and if that is not possible, then B, no overhead structures, no surrounding structures, no heaters, those 5 or 6 items. I mean, we can ask the council to, do whatever, and if they are saying we can't go there, then we at least have got to get the B plan in.
I don't know, it seems like it overly
Commissioners,
complicates things.
I apologize for interrupting, but if we, staff just has a couple clarifications that we're hoping to
Okay.
ask the commission. So I think one of them is, there's been a lot of discussion, and what I'm inferring is a lot of it is referencing State Street. But there are 3 different components to the ERETO. There's State Street, there's off of State Street parklets, so all of the ones on the side streets, and then the private property. So just when you make comments for consideration, if you could be clear on whether you're discussing State Street or parklets off of State Street or private property, so that staff make sure that we're understanding if it's everything, if you're saying no structures for the entire EPV, or if you're saying no structures for State Street. And I'm going to have just Ms. Clark or Mr. Bassi, if there was anything to add or any clarification we needed.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Just to expand on that a little bit, I think in particular, we're interested in getting comments on particularly parklets off of State Street, so not in the promenade, but looking at outdoor dining options that are outside of the promenade in the direction that this committee would like to give.
Commissioner Jordan.
A quick comment. State Street, off State Street, private property. But this commission deals with the EPV.
Right.
And that's the way I would define whatever recommendation we have covers the entire EPV.
Good point.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Uli.
I don't know, I'll try and be very clear
Thank you.
about my opinion about all this stuff. State Street is unique. The community has voiced their strong desire to have a pedestrian promenade of some definition, which is under discussion, as we know. So I am comfortable with my suggested Plan B on State Street that removes vertical structures from that environment and has parameters with how you deal with the rest of it.
Which would allow low improvements.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details, but because that needs to be sorted out by a longer conversation than we have time for.
Just thinking if you could put
Yeah.
this in the form of something we could take a straw poll on so
Yeah.
that we can see how many people support that, and then we can move on.
It would be appropriate improvements to facilitate outdoor dining. because we're no longer under an official pandemic order, I would eliminate everything else. No parklets on the side street, no occupation of private parking lots that are there to support the business that's in the building, including accessible parking, et cetera, and only remain on State Street because it's part of a longer conversation that will at least take 7 years to sort out and may take 30 years to build. I'll be gone by then. I've only got 25 good years. And so, you know, I'm not going to see the end result of that, but it is a thing in motion. And I think I would offer that as a means to figure out if the rest of the commission joins me or not.
Okay, so do you have that down, or do we need to restate that?
If you can please restate that exactly, thank you.
Okay, so the position of the commission would be that vertical structures,
Wait, A and B.
I don't know that we need to go A and B.
I think this is just a plan.
This is a plan and vote on it. So is to allow for outdoor dining on State Street only. Outside of State Street, all other parklets or whatever they may be called, whether on side streets or on private property, shall be eliminated and conform to the codes in place prior to the pandemic. On State Street, there's openness to some improvements in the street as long as they were low and there are no overhead roof coverings allowed going forward. Is that enough of a statement or description?
Shouldn't
For
we?
me, it's not.
Well, you may be voting against it, but
Well, I have a question. Didn't we say that if we did as you just stated, there would be guidelines? And Commissioner Uli just said that that would be something to be worked out. Well, it is June now, and the ERETO goes away in December. So how much time are we going to have to put together some kind of guideline for these particular, if we go with B and we say that you can have a outdoor dining in the street with no overhead, et cetera, per guidelines? What guidelines?
I would suggest those guidelines already exist. They just need to be edited to remove vertical structures.
well, I don't know. You know, once again, I'm an incrementalist, and restaurants have invested a bunch of money in these structures, and if we get the offensive part off, I don't see a point in having them rebuild the lower part necessarily.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
But, so I don't want to give too much definition to what we're recommending, but just in general, none of these outside of State Street, but on State Street.
If they exist now, they would be allowed to stay. But what about a new one?
Yeah, so we should develop guidelines to guide any new structures that would be built in State Street. I don't want to encourage that.
Which I believe
No.
we have already. There are guidelines already.
Okay. Well,
We don't want
If I may,
structures in
Chair
State
Howe-
period.
Chair House and Commissioners, I just would like to, there are lots of existing guidelines, and I think it was understood that this conversation there would be multiple conversations to refine an idea. And I think really thinking principles, big picture, kind of what Councilmember Snedden was asking for, kind of guidance of what is requested, even your straw poll. There's currently kind of a straw poll out there. It'd be nice to kind of get the commission's input on that plan. That's kind of just get a sense of how the commission feels on that. But I imagine that there could be refinement and kind of getting at some of Chair Gumbine's conversations. But initially, this is something that is going to go to council next week. So the timeliness of it is, can there be a kind of big picture start? And Mr. Bossi, it looks like you want to say something.
Yes, thank you very much. Just real quick, as you talk about this, back when council put in place, they went from guidelines to requirements on State Street, which I believe is what you were just talking about. If you come out from that point on, you cannot install a outdoor business facility with a roof. So you can't do that anymore. So there are, in those requirements, they're not guidelines anymore, there are requirements for State Street. That is one of them. No more roof structures. If you have one existing, you are allowed to keep it. The idea there was that council and even more so the businesses didn't want us coming back every other month with new requirements. So we tried to put something together that would last for quite a while, and that was one of the many requirements. No more roof.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to find out, is that summary, as I stated it, enough to take a vote on?
No.
You're not going to agree on it necessarily, but is it enough to take a vote on?
You heard Brian say that, existing structures that are there now can remain. That's not what we want to recommend to the council.
No, we're not recommending that to the council. We're saying that the overhead, the roof part of it needs to come down. And that, there's flexibility on platforms that extend out into the street to have accessible dining.
What about heaters?
We could opine on that, and in fact, that might be another, is that separate down here? No, but.
Do we all buy into the metal handrail around the edge? I mean, I don't buy into that.
We could have another hour of discussion about what parts we support and which parts we don't, but.
Vice Chair, if I could make a suggestion, that one of the things it sounds like we're in agreement is that we are reinforcing the principle that dining structures in the EPV are subject to regulation, that in addition to ADA regulation, there are regulations about that the HLC has about materiality, color, lighting, and signage. Those are existing things, and it would have to, we're reinforcing a principle that those apply at the end of this emergency period. That's one of the comments that we are making to the city council today. And that in addition, we have specific suggestions about things. We could talk about heaters, but I don't see that's significantly advancing the discussion to have a discussion about outdoor heaters. I have an opinion, but on heaters, but.
Where to go from here?
Read what you have again.
Okay, could you restate the summary, please?
Yes. Structures to allow for outdoor dining on State Street only, outside and all other parklets, whether on side streets or private streets or private areas, should be eliminated and revert to the codes in place prior to the pandemic. On State Street, there is an openness for some improvements in the street as long as they are low with no roof coverings.
I think that's a good direction to council.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah.
So just to maybe clean that up a little bit, just to say that, that they are allowed to stay, those that are there now are allowed to stay on State Street if they, but they must remove everything above 42 inches.
Something like that.
Something like that, and that there's no heating.
Well, that implies that no new installations could go in, even if.
Okay, so that's a question. Are new ones allowed to go in? Are we saying that?
The gentleman already stated that they are allowed to go in, but they cannot go in with a roof.
Right, okay.
So we're talking about the ones that exist. Are we going to
Okay.
make them remove the roof as part of this recommendation to City Council, or they continue to be grandfathered in until they are modified? And if they're modified, then they have to comply with the regulations.
Well, I think it's our intent that they take off the superstructure. So is that clear in the summary?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, I don't think we need to get into.
Okay, and then lighting and
It's,
we don't want to
that's
say.
detail oriented, and I think, basically we're advising council we're okay to continue outdoor dining as long as we get rid of the overhead structures, and we want them eliminated on side streets and outside of EPV, or on private property.
And that they meet the guidelines, the requirements?
Those are requirements, and they would be required to meet the requirements.
Well, then.
I don't
But the-
have to
but the one-
stipulate
But the
that.
ones that are there now do not meet the requirements. Well, I guess they
They need to remove
Along the
their,
way, they kind of met the requirements somehow, but.
they need to remove their roofs.
Yeah.
So,
To the chair, through the chair to Commissioner Ensberg, what I could recommend as an additional comment to that summary would be all existing outdoor dining facilities be brought to meet existing guidelines such as outdoor lighting, EPV guidelines, historic resource design guidelines, et cetera.
is that requirement not currently in place?
Chair House, again, back when the emergency ordinance was put into place and then the subsequent ordinances after that, things like design review, HLC review were put off to the side, as were many zoning, alcohol beverage control, all those things were suspended, not just here, but throughout the state.
Well, but my question is, in terms of lighting or heaters or umbrellas or things like that, you have, you came up with these requirements, and were existing installations required to comply with those requirements, or are they currently grandfathered in?
They are required to come into compliance with those.
Okay, so it seems like that's addressed.
Yeah, so somebody who, prior to getting those requirements in place, had exposed wood, just raw wood, they had to come back and,
Okay.
and stain or paint according to the requirements.
Okay, so
So-
take a straw vote on this.
Well, to Ms. Rydell, so could we use the word, should we use the word requirements, not guidelines, because they are requirements, I think.
Did we
When-
have?
In the text.
They are
that-
adopted requirements by state
So
council.
in the text that you had there, I think you said guidelines, and I think maybe we want to be careful to say requirements.
Okay, design guidelines and requirements.
Requirements.
Yeah, structure, well, what do we call it? Outdoor dining requirements. Okay, so let's take a straw vote on this. How many support the summary as stated?
All right. Oh, okay, that works too.
How many opposed?
And can you please state for members who are attending via Zoom or the recording, because they might not see this?
Or should we just take a
I
voice
think
vote?
if you could just do a roll call,
can we
that's
do a
my
roll call?
preference.
Thank you. I'll start with Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Lundvik,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Dordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg,
Yes.
and Vice Chair House.
Yes.
It passes. Thank you.
Whew, okay,
That was painful.
yeah.
Well, my concern, Mr. Chair, is
Uh-huh.
that this is not tough enough.
Well, I know that you feel that way, and we will see what council does with it and move on from there, because there's just many moving pieces here, I think. So should we group some of this together? Let's see.
Personally, I don't think we have to worry about the details.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
in the requirements
Yeah.
and in our guidelines for lighting and all those other things.
And should the commission wish, we could always schedule another discussion once city council has the first, kind of starts to discuss the policy, if there's more information or details.
Yeah, I agree. The rest of it is detail, and so I think we've given the direction that is going to set the tone for where we go from here, so.
Hopefully, it won't take us 7 years to get through it.
Or 7 years to discuss. Okay, so I guess we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, yes? Okay. That is item 3, 414 Chapala Street. This is a continued item, review after final approval, located in EPV. The project is adjacent to 14 West Gutierrez Street, a historic structure of merit, and 428 Chapala Street, a historic structure of merit. Proposal to demolish, this is the discussion of the original project, but this is an approval of review after final requested for revised garage entry, window and door details, window colors, tile wall scuppers, southern wall at property line, and backflow preventer location and landscaping. Project must demonstrate substantial conformance to the plans that received project design approval on November 2nd, 2016. Project was last reviewed on April 12th of this year. And so if you could give your names for the record and your presentation, please.
Hi there, my name is Laura Bernard. I'm here on behalf of the Cornell Collective.
Jessica Harlan with Barefoot Design Landscape Architecture.
Good afternoon, Robert Forzonde on behalf of the applicant and on the contractor.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for your time here today. No parklets proposed here.
Good. I don't want to ever hear that word again.
Low-hanging fruit. We are back here to talk to you about some revisions based off of our last review after final hearing. As you might remember, you provided feedback regarding a couple items that we have addressed, and we'd like to bring them here for you for your review today. The first such item was painting the header beam here to be a dark brown to match the rest of the wood. It is plaster, but it's been painted dark brown to match. Previously, it was the white plaster color. We've also added the tile shrouds on the scuppers that were not there before. Careful. And then we also, let me go ahead and zoom out. We've painted the backflow preventer green. Previously, it was an eclectic, arguably artistic medley of colors. So it's now green, and the landscaping has been replaced as well in both of these areas, if you want to speak to that a little bit, Jess.
Yeah, they replaced the landscape per the original plant palette and plan. Obviously, because the backflow was not in that location, there's a few less. But other than that, the applicant did as directed in the last meeting.
So just to kind of run through the comments that we received at the last hearing, the first one was regarding painting the beam and bracket. The second was regarding shrouding the light fixtures in the garage, which we had discussed this previously. You can kind of see it in this photo. We will be back in front of you in a separate application for a gate in this garage area. So we're expecting that the header box for the coiling gate will function as a shroud, and if not, we've heard these comments and we'll be addressing it under that design effort. So that was the second item. That was non-actionable. We talked about the tile shroud. And the planting. And so then I think the final item is regarding the plaster on the southern wall.
So thank you for the time this afternoon. On that southern wall, the southern wall is a zero setback. We have done everything within our abilities to try to get access from that neighbor to then access from that side to then plaster. The neighbor has been extremely hostile, has threatened to call the police if we did anything, accessed or in any way. So we've asked nicely multiple times. I've spoken to Ms. Ostringer at the city attorney's office. I'm an attorney by trade as well. We've looked at every possible way to approach this, and there is no way to do it without violating, without committing criminal trespass. So the neighbor has had the property on the market. It has fallen through escrow several times. We were hoping that a new buyer would come in and we'd be able to resolve this. It has not happened. It does not seem to be feasible in the foreseeable future. So we'd ask and then I did speak with Ms. Ostringer about that prior to this meeting, about having the requirement that that southern wall be plastered removed as a condition, because currently we cannot get final approval or for the final occupancy permit on this project because of this single issue. We've done everything else. The project is ready to go to get final sign off, and we're unable to do that. So that would be the request we'd make today. It's our understanding that property, the neighboring property, once it's sold, it's going to be redeveloped. It's not going to stay in its current state. So once that happens, that southern wall will be obstructed and it will not be seen from any public vantage points.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation? Yes, thank you. Okay, we'll open it to public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair House. If anyone participating virtually would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand on Zoom and we can call on you to speak. Not seeing any raised hands. If there's anyone in the audience in person who would like to speak on the item, please make sure you're filling out a speaker slip to turn in. Also not seeing anyone moving for that. We did not receive any written correspondence, so with that, I'll turn it back to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. I will close public comment and open it to questions from the commission. Anybody?
Question?
Yes.
I just want to be clear. So you have notified the city attorney of the problems of access?
Correct.
The city's aware. And the problem of access is not a physical problem, but a legal problem. You can't get access.
Well, I would say it's both,
Okay.
Mr. Commissioner. It's, we can't physically access, we can't physically apply the stucco without entering onto the
Right.
neighbor's property.
But if that property changed hands at some future date, you would be able to apply the stucco.
Presumably, Mr. Commissioner, if the subsequent owner was nice and granted us the access to do it,
But
yes.
the primary obstacle is a legal one, and the city is aware of that.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Any other questions? Doesn't appear so, so.
Well, I have a curious question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you were in our position, on this side of the table, and the applicant came to you and said, I can't plaster that wall in the El Pueblo Viejo district, the landmark district, I can't plaster that wall or paint it, what would you have done sitting in our position?
That's a great question, Mr. Commissioner. That would be an issue that, had we known the issues and had the city staff, had we been able to work together at the time of the building permit issuance and at the design, had we known that in advance, we could have maybe done some things earlier on or preemptively, but.
You might have said, well, set it back a foot so you can get in there?
Correct. Yeah, we could have moved things a certain way to allow access, but unfortunately, no one was aware of this and no one foresaw this occurring.
Well, that leads me to another question. I did walk by there yesterday because I wanted to see if the other issue, which was the windows that lacked muntins, had been resolved, and it has been resolved very nicely. But also, it occurred to me that it doesn't quite show in this picture, but there are leader heads and downspouts further back on this wall, and so those are projecting at least 6 inches out. So I'm wondering if, in fact, this wall is maybe back 6 inches or so from the property line. And what I wondered is it an acceptable mitigation for now to perhaps paint that wall at least a certain distance back? I say that because I walked up the street further, and the building that Chair Grumbine's offices are in is of brick construction, and the side facing the street is plastered, but the side perpendicular to the street is brick and painted. And so, you know, the problem kind of disappears when you do that. I mean, somebody that's looking closely will notice, but it's not as standing out as this is. So a question would be do you see any problem painting from the balcony above, you know, with a roller on an extension pole? It could be done.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that we would like to see this resolved. And we would like to paint it if we could. Unfortunately, there's something called OSHA, and I don't think a roller over the balcony would fly.
I don't think that's a problem.
Well, we have investigated this as a potential solution. And it's, my understanding is that it would require scaffolding to paint it, and the scaffolding could not be, you know, within the 6 inches or whatever we have between our building and the property line.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, unfortunately, truly, because I agree that would be a great solution.
I would tend to agree with the applicant that adjoining property will be developed sometime, and maybe in the not-too-distant future, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And at that time, providing he still owns the property and everybody feels good about solving the problem, plaster or paint it at that time would be the best thing to do. I think putting paint on it now probably creates a bonding issue of plaster in the future. So I would say we can live with it the way it is.
Okay, all right. Bury that issue. So.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Butler.
I did have a question. Is there any, is the stone face, or not stone, but the brick, is it just exposed? There's no sealant on it? There's nothing of a finish on those bricks or on that wall?
I do not believe so. I believe it's just.
Because that gets back to the question, you know, if you painted it now, or if there's some sort of finish.
Plasterers have their ways.
They'll work around it, yeah, exactly. But I was just wondering if there was a sealant, for God's sakes, if nothing else, because it's going to be exposed to the weather in its current condition, right?
There was every intention of plastering it. So I don't believe it has been
So
sealed
there's
or
no
prepared
sealant on
for-
the, right.
Yeah.
so
You
it's-
normally wouldn't,
Yeah,
so.
okay, all right.
Okay, we're in questions. I guess I have one other question. If you could go to the view of the backflow preventer. When I was there, it dawned on me that, okay, there's just a single gate leaf, and so it's not, the width of that walkway isn't required because there's a double gate there. And, what's that?
Trash pulling, the dumpsters are back there.
Yeah, but through that single gate door, isn't it? Okay, so my point was, you see how much pavement there is between the latch on the gate and where the backflow preventer is. And I don't know if we had any discussion last time about possibly saw cutting some of that concrete and get a lot more planting there, because, you know, that backflow preventer is still a big sore thumb.
Yeah, I know in our previous conversations, we had talked about putting in some planters on casters. The challenge is the dumpsters are back in there, and given the maneuvering challenges of a heavy dumpster, we wanted to give them the best shot of not running into things or, you know, running it off the edge and getting stuck in the mulch. I'm sure you could shave off a little bit. Whether or not it's worth it, frankly, I don't know.
Chair House,
Yes.
they do have new plants that they've put in there that are just babies right now, but I'm sure,
Two of them.
yeah, I'm sure they're going to grow up and help to conceal. We're seeing
With
it.
strap leaves, I mean, I just don't see how that's going to conceal any.
Well, I don't think it'll conceal it completely, but it will help to, you know, take your eye off of it so much. I think we need to let the plants grow in. They're just babies right now.
Our last application included the planters on casters as an option, and through our discussion, it was said, we think painting and just a minimal planting in and around the backflow, what we can achieve was going to be a good solution that was achievable and something you guys could get behind. So that we had explored having planters without saw cutting, so that if we need to move them in order to gain access, we could still have that thoroughfare. I'm open to any other alternatives.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, well, I think we're in discussion now.
Yeah, okay. I think that we as a committee bear a certain amount of responsibility for what we see, in that we should be catching this when the application is before us and we have an opportunity to solve it with, you know, a practical design solution. I don't know that we're going to benefit anybody by cutting 6 inches of concrete off the sidewalk to create a planter. And I think that they have done what they're doing. If they want to win some kind of design award in the future, they're going to find another way to conceal that stuff. But I think we bear some responsibility in not having caught that ourselves initially.
Well, I would respond to that if I understand correctly, the backflow preventer was relocated, and that's why we're looking at it. So it's not something we previously approved and we've got to live with it. It's something that was changed, and is there a mitigation to that? And I'm not talking about 6 inches of concrete, I'm talking about to the second score line, which still is wider than the gate. And so once you get that dumpster out of there, you're not going to turn it. You're still going to go in a straight direction. So,
I'd like to make a motion to accept the changes as shown, with the applicant to come back with the screening of the garage light fixture solution and the future painting and/or plastering of the south wall.
I'll second that.
Second.
Pardon my interruption. If I can clarify that motion, you made an approval and then return for?
Yeah, they're gonna return for the shielding of the garage light fixtures.
So we can either, this is a review after final, we can
Yes,
either
review at the final is fine.
approve it with the condition and a
Yes,
specific
right,
condition?
right.
But we can't ask them to return and approve it?
So
Well,
I think their intent was to bring the garage gate back as a separate application, which then they would address, hopefully, that gate does the screening we asked, and if not, then we can condition that particular effort to take care of the lighting, unless you're uncomfortable with that.
No.
So then in that case, I would recommend amending the motion to say approval of review after final is submitted with the comment that, and then you can expand on the garage door.
So a comment, not a condition.
Correct.
Okay. Is that okay with making
Yes.
a motion?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, there were 3 seconds.
Yeah. Which second are you going with, Mr. Chair?
Oh, there were 3 seconds? Okay, who seconded it?
Well,
Never mind.
Butler.
I think
Go
this is
ahead,
good.
Robert.
all right.
I mean, Mr. Uli.
Then I'm okay
Second,
according to the
Uli.
3 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Butler? you had
I was just going to
something
say, I feel that the applicant has approached us in good faith. They've taken our recommendations, they've done everything we've asked for, and hit the wall on one particular issue, and they're going to come back with this situation with the garage. They want to put a gate in there. So I think this should be supported. They've come with good faith. Good for them.
No
Agreed.
question about that.
It's unfortunate their neighbor isn't doing the same thing,
Yeah.
but.
And we know where he lives.
Wait. Don't let the mayor know you said
We'll have a
that.
midnight paint party.
Yeah, okay. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. I'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner Lenvick.
Yes.
Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Commissioner McClure.
Yes.
Commissioner Dordan.
Yes.
Commissioner Drury.
Yes.
Commissioner Ensberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Butler.
Yes.
And Vice Chair House.
This is going to be the rare occasion I'm going to say no. Just because, and my reason for saying that is I feel that the mitigation for the relocation of the backflow preventer is not adequate. So, but you've got your approval, so, yes. Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Uh-huh. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Second time's a charm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, congratulations on your advancement in the firm.
Much appreciated.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
we don't know what you're talking. Was she-
Okay. We are moving on to item 4 on the agenda, 2201 Laguna Street. This is a one-time pre-application consultation review. And this is the Mission Santa Barbara, which is a city, state, and national landmark. The mission was constructed in 1786, 1815, and 1925 by Father Antonio Ripoli and Jose Antonio Ramirez in the Spanish colonial style, the mission style.
How coincidental.
Yeah, proposal to construct an ADA and building code compliant access ramp to the main doors. The applicant will present 2 options for review. No final appealable action will take place at this meeting. Project compatibility findings and minor alteration findings will be required for project design approval. Greetings, if you could give your names for the record and then your presentation.
Okay, thank you. This is Fred Sweeney with 196 Architects, representing Old Mission Santa Barbara. On my left, I have Father Henry, oh boy. Toyo. I forgot his name. And Father Schwab on my right. We're here today to get a understanding as to whether or not the HLC would even be amenable to allowing a handicap access ramp to be placed on the steps or near the steps of the front of the mission. If we're able to garner some support for that, there are many other issues that need to be resolved, but we felt it was important to come at this point before we spent a lot of energy dealing with handicap parking spaces and travel distance and all the other kinds of things that one has to look at when such a project is proposed. So without that, in our 15 minutes, I'd like Father Schwab to share with us the history, the decades-long effort by the mission to do this kind of project. And then Father Henry will talk about a little bit about some discovery he made in terms of the last few inches to get to the door.
So beginning well over 35, maybe 40 years ago now, I remember Father Virgil going through this project, and we didn't get very far. The difficulty is compounded every time there's an event in the church because there are significant numbers of people that need wheelchair access or walker access, and it's exceedingly difficult for them to manage it. Right now, they have to come in nearest the tower, go all the way down the arcade in the wrong direction, through several narrow doorways and hallways, all the way back up the inside, going uphill, and eventually getting to a ramp on top of that to get in the building. So it's really difficult. It's off-putting for most people. Which you may not be aware is the church towers in the front wall were rebuilt beginning in 1952. The colonial structure is everything behind that. So there are a number of options. In the past, I know were considered trying to go through the museum, which would require demolition of buildings dating back to 1800, knocking out doorways, windows, interior walls, changing the floors, all kinds of things in the museum of historic interest that would have to be significantly altered. And I believe what we've come up with is the best possible solution. We also cannot go in through the cemetery side door of the church because the cemetery is higher than the inside of the church, which would require removal of historic parts of the building to make it low enough to get out through the cemetery. So this is the plan we've come up with, and hopefully it will make some sense to you, and you can give us some ideas from here, what you think is best to do.
Father Henry, you want to talk about one of the challenges of the getting any kind of handicap accessible ramp, walkway, what have you, to these doors right here, is there's about a 5-inch differential between this threshold here, which was part of the 1952 rebuild, and the top of the current platform. The platform, we believe, is built over an original set of steps that are buried beneath this. And we think the platform is actually older than this piece. When the earthquake repair was done, when the entire front 20 or so feet of the admission was taken down in 1952 and reconstructed in reinforced concrete, including the towers, as far as we can tell, the debris from the 1951 Bakersfield earthquake, that's what caused the requirement for 1952, is that it didn't appear that they replaced or did anything other than minor repair to this platform, so, and to these steps. But we do know this entire structure here was all completely rebuilt. That's all reinforced concrete. So the challenge is these columns right here, and the pilaster colonnade here, and this differential. So Father Henry has an architectural background in his education, so he's may want to share a little bit about what he discovered right here.
Yep. Yes. So in order to be able to completely accessible, the podium has to meet with the interior floor level. So luckily, we have a space from the front door to the second interior door, about almost 8 feet. And then that is completely enclosed area where we can shave off a little bit, slope down from the second interior door to the front door to meet where the plaza podium level is.
Oops, sorry.
And that would only affect the 1952-54 rebuild.
So you could grade it.
Yeah,
Yes.
grade it all the way
Okay.
to meet, yes.
Yeah, that's what this detail sketch here shows. So this is a section through that threshold. So we start cutting back here, which is about at the end of where the 4-foot leaves go back into currently as they open. So right about there, you come back and you begin to slope this so you get down to the 1/2-inch ADA differential requirement between the top of the platform and the floor of the mission. So with that, let me just finish to go through, because we've got 8 minutes left.
Don't worry about that.
Let me just go through, I'm learning how to maneuver all this stuff. We did look at we looked at several options, and I've got boards back here that show several options, going back to Vitruvius and how the Mission Fathers and the Chumash built the original facade. But we came up with this idea of trying to minimize the amount of disturbance to not only the visual characteristic of the front of the Mission, but also to the steps themselves. And one option is what we just discussed, which is to keep the platform, the top of the steps where they are today. There's a lot of damage up there, and at some point, some of that tile work is going to have to get replaced, or there's tripping problems already. But keep the platform where it is, and then use the sloping at the door to get in and meet all our ADA requirements. The other option was to add one more complete step to the entire front set of steps. That would take care of the 5 to 6 inch differential at the door threshold. But that would require then placing a whole another set of steps on what's there. And historically, to some degree, that's maybe touching it more than we need to touch. So that's why we, and also Nicole Hernandez on the site visit informed us that if we did that, then we would be blocking the bottom of those pediments. We'd be covering those up by 6 inches. So then do you pull back from those? Do you recreate them and move them up 6 inches, et cetera? So that became problematic. So what you see today is we would keep the steps the way they are. This is a handrail. These handrails that are here now got put in at sometime in the 1960s, as best I can tell from researching photograph memorabilia from the Mission Archives and other sources. So these got put in at some point later, maybe at the same time the stair rail was put on this little back step that goes into that side door of the cemetery. So this solution then puts a ramp coming here, starting up, turning, meeting the steps here, and I'll show you the plan in a minute, and then coming around the corner of the north or east tower, and then providing the required railing because of the differential drop here for code, and constructing out of sandstone to match the sandstone that's here. And if you've been on these steps, you'll know that they've been touched and repaired several times. You can see forensically where some of the stones were damaged or removed or replaced, grouts different, et cetera. So they've been worked on from time to time. Let me see if I can get down to the plan here. It's so much easier just to turn a sheet of paper. Turn a sheet of paper, but this is the way we do it. Okay, so the idea was to start about right here, and we had a full survey done by Santex because up until now, everybody's been guessing about what the differential is between here and there, and we now actually have real survey marks. So about right here, we start up at 1 and 12, we come to a landing, we turn and come at 1 and 12. There is a wall right here, a little masonry wall that was built at some point here, and then of course this wall that's been put here along Los Olivas Street has been there for some period of time. We would bring that out a little bit, which affords us a little ability to put some more landscaping here. And then we would touch about the third step high into the existing stairs, the steps that go up to this gate, come to another landing, turn the corner, come up, landing, and then we daylight here, and then using the strategy that Father Henry talked about is then we make the last piece of differential at the doorway. There is, if the concept is something that the HLC could endorse, then we would come back at some point for an official application to the city, and at that point, we then have to address the handicap parking spaces. I drew this in here just to show that, yes, it's possible to get a 2% level dimensional van required space, et cetera, to be able to meet ADA requirements and signage and so forth. We're not sure yet whether that's sufficient, whether currently there is theoretically designated handicap spaces here now, none of which comply with the ADA. There's no signage, et cetera, other than a blue curb. And currently, This area of the Mission is only open for parking during funerals, weddings, and at Saturday evening mass and Sunday mass, and maybe some other special events. Other than that, it's completely closed most of the time, and the other parking, handicap parking spaces, if you've been up there, are off of Laguna Street, and I think we have a,
Those are actually on city property.
there, yeah, that part is owned by the city of Santa Barbara, and there seems to be some discussion there. This was an attempt to, from a computer-generated perspective, to show you what that might look like. There's always discussion, should it be vertical pickets, should it be horizontal? Typically, this was what one would see. In fact, that's what you see on this existing railing up here, and you see those railings elsewhere in the Mission. And then, of course, just the minimal amount of railing here because you don't have the differential between the top of the walk and getting up there. So I think that's it. The other drawings are just background information, going back to try to figure out, what did it look like? Was that little staircase to the cemetery really there in 1951? It's hard to tell. There's not a lot of good photographs. You can see the damage that fell on top of the existing steps, et cetera. And then this sketch just kind of shows you where parking is and back of house parking, et cetera. So that's our presentation for the moment. We're just here to see if this is even something you would entertain, and if it is, then we'd, of course, come back with an appropriate set of documents resolving the handicap parking spaces and distance requirements, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
I will open it for public comment.
And pardon my interruption, Mr. Chair, if I could briefly interject. I just don't want anyone to sit here longer than they need to. Before we launch into public comment for this item, this was announced at the beginning of the meeting and will be announced at the conclusion of this item. But item 5, 20 East De La Guerra, has been postponed to August 2nd. So if you are here to comment on or hear that item, it will not be heard today. And then I'll just turn it back over to Kira for public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Riedel. For public comment for this item, if anyone in the audience would like to speak on this item, please make sure to fill out a speaker slip over on the side counter and then turn it into me over here. While that's going on, I'll turn to virtual. If anyone participating virtually would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand and we can call on you. Not seeing any raised hands. And I have not received any speaker slips for this item. We did receive written correspondence from Paulina Kahn, which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. With that, I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Ms. Riedel, maybe you might want to advise that person that just came in as well.
Yes, if I could just announce one last time, item 5, 20 East De La Guerra, is postponed till August 2nd. So that is when that item will return.
Thank you. Okay. So we've got public
Questions?
comment out of the way. So questions?
Yes.
Sir?
Could you describe to us the height of the top landing as you approach the stairs
Okay.
to the adjacent grade
Okay, let me get back to,
below the landing,
let me get
So the
back
height
to.
from the bottom of the flight to the top of the flight?
or just
Yeah,
that particular
I think
landing?
that's what he's asking. So let me just get back to that. Oh, I could use this.
Yeah.
So right here, that piece is the 6-inch, I think it's 6 inches or 4 inches requirement by code when you,
Yeah,
when you have that.
and the surface, so it's 6
And then the
inches.
surface touches right at the top of the existing platform. Then it starts to ramp down at 1 and 12, so that 4-inch or 6-inch curb remains. But right about here, from here to here, you're now starting to get below the 30 inches required for somebody can fall off of that thing. And then you turn the corner, and then again, right about from here to here, you really have to have this railing. From here to there, you probably could do without it. It could be similar to this. But I thought that might look a little funny, given that we have this railing over here that has a similar vertical pickets, et cetera. So,
You were asking about the height from there.
but from here to here, it's about 30 inches.
So, as you know, we did an access ramp at the courthouse to get from the upper platform down to the lowest part of the lawn.
Right.
And we were fortunate enough to play around with the slope of the ramp and the placement of things, so we eliminated any metal work.
Right.
There are no rails. The ramp is shallow enough that you don't need a rail to pull yourself up the ramp, which is the purpose of that rail.
Right.
And the landing level technically is where you're standing. If it's below the 30 inches, you don't need a guardrail.
Right.
So first of all, I'm totally supportive of this. I think it needs to be done. But if you could manipulate those numbers so that you can eliminate the metal work, then this becomes much more transparent.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I wanted to do that further exploration, but at this point, we thought, well, we better come and ask first before we spend a whole lot of time. My work on this is pro bono, but the mission is having to pay for 196 to help us, and the engineers and other folks that'll be there. The other thought when we started to do was to pull this out a little bit and create a planter here, but that just seemed like a little bit more intrusive. That's another push away from the tower, and it didn't seem like, if we're trying to take the minimal approach to be as transparent as we can, this was the closest thing. And yes, manipulating this rail will be a challenge, but we can work on that.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Drury.
Yes, would it be possible to, this is a design to run the masonry parallel to the existing tower?
Level, you mean?
Yeah, and that was one of the other sketches I have sitting behind me. I did a whole different watercolor, because one of the things that I first explored, and Mr. Lindvik has seen the sketch, is Vitruvius's original drawings that are in the archives, which are directly connected to what the Mission Fathers actually looked at when they decided to do this facade that we see today. And where is that little, yeah, right, whoops. Yeah, this sketch right here. So that's actually out of the Spanish language interpretation of Vitruvius's 10 books of architecture. And what I couldn't find was any conditions where Vitruvius didn't think everything was just flat when he built the building, right? They didn't do rails and they didn't do steps. And so the first one I came up with was repeating a horizontal on both towers. But that began to look a little funny, like we're trying to make more than it should be. And so we backed off of that, and that was a sketch I have behind me.
But it could be done with no structural failings or anything.
Yeah, right.
Commissioner Butler.
Yes, I would agree. I think this is a worthy effort. I guess maybe a naive question, but did you look at removable or temporary options and something that you could roll out before the mass?
I have most of my career in the last 40 years has been doing big public work. And when ADA was first introduced, particularly I was doing a lot of K-12 schools and medical work, and we tried all sorts of things, including the little elevator thing that you push a button and whatever. Over the years, those have failed miserably. One, because they're either not maintained, they're not upkeep, they're complicated for a person with disabilities and you have to cover everybody, blind, impaired, et cetera. Those become really problematic. So what one has found over the years, particularly in a public entity or a public structure like this, is it's much simpler, as I think Mr. Uli knows from the courthouse, to just address it in this fashion.
I had to ask the question.
Commissioner Gordon.
I have a question about current practice, and in particular about funerals. How is a casket carried into the church? Up the steps?
With considerable difficulty. And I've done it many times. Unfortunately, I've been the pallbearer on several occasions up those steps. And by tradition, the hearse moves to the front of the steps at midpoint. The pallbearers are brought to the back of the hearse. The casket is taken out, and it's maneuvered up the stairs just like we see when someone is interned or set into our U.S. Capitol. So it's the
Here's
same
my
maneuver.
next question. Could a casket be wheeled up that ramp?
Not in the
Can't make the
configuration,
turn.
not in the configuration that we're showing, no. Yeah, that would be very difficult. Yeah, the landing would have to be way bigger to make the turns. Yeah,
With pallbearers.
with pallbearers, even if you had it on a trolley.
On a trolley, that's what I wondered.
Yeah, no, there's not enough dimension to make that work. And even if you could, we run out of property. Because the east tower is only, I think it's about 20 feet away from the property line at that point.
Okay.
Chair House,
Yes.
you know the main terracotta patio, or is that what, the stage area?
Yes.
It's pitting and it's eroding.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any concern about that becoming non-ADA compliant? at some
Oh, yeah, well, and that's why I mentioned that if we move with this kind of project, then more than likely, I would recommend to the mission that we go in and do a major repair of that platform, because there's a lot of stuff that's falling apart, there's trip hazards, et cetera. And we'd have to come back and make sure that we use appropriate material, et cetera. What's difficult is, as I said, those steps have been touched many times over the years, even though they're probably, as we look at it, they may be the oldest piece of the mission at the front that we know about.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, there's
I
a
have one more
question.
question.
Okay.
Is the door going into the cemetery, is that going to be unobstructed in terms of the view? Or there'll be something in front of it, I suppose, from the...
Oh, no, let me go around. No, the door, the little gate that goes in by the north or east tower, where Juana Maria is supposedly laid to rest, somewhere around there.
Somewhere there.
We think it's that corner tower, but no one's really sure. But let me go up to, sorry, this is not a. That door would remain from right about there. Those last 4 steps are what is there today. We would just leave it as is.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
And the only thing we'd have to modify is this railing a little bit, because we're going to enter at the 3rd step. So there's a little piece that have to be redone.
Thank you.
Chair House?
Yes, Commissioner Ensberg?
And if I'm understanding correctly, you have this little hinge element on the bottom of the door to enable the doors to be able to be opened with this
Yes.
new slope thing, right?
Yes,
Okay.
right. And we want to do it with wood that would be the same species and stain color, et cetera, as the doors are today. And the doors, quite frankly, are probably going to need some repair anyway. They've been damaged. They're blistering, et cetera. So there'll be a lot of remedial work just to the doors and a few things around the bottom that are going to have to be taken care of while you're in there doing this work.
Okay, and the doors, so do you, if someone would just come up to the door, you'd have to open that, you would have to flip that up before you could come in, correct?
Correct, yeah.
But normally you would probably set it up in advance for when you have services and you already would have the doors open.
Right. There is typically ushers that do all of that prior to any service, any event within the mission, et cetera. So there's protocol that's in play by the Franciscans about how that front door is used.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll go into comments.
I have
a comment.
a comment. I'm very supportive of this. A couple of comments. One, you won't find any help in Vitruvius. There's nothing in Vitruvius that'll help you with
That's what I
this ramp.
discovered.
Yeah,
It didn't
don't
help.
go there. The other thing is, my other comments, I'm very supportive of this. Anybody who's ever dealt with mobility impairment knows this is the right thing to do. I also think it probably aligns very well with the norms and best practices of liturgical design in terms of being able to walk in the front door and begin that symbolic procession from the front door to the altar past the baptismal font. So I'm very supportive of this. Oh, the last comment, those columns rest on those those plinths. And I would hate to see the surface level of the top steps manipulated in a way that obscured the base of those plinths. They're part of the Vitruvian design.
Right, and that's why we didn't go with the other option, or
Okay.
didn't bring it up.
It didn't look right when we
Yeah.
tried it.
Yeah.
Looks like Commissioner
Harris?
Hansberg has something to say.
Yes, I wanted to also express great support for this project. I think it's really well done, and I think it'll be, do everything that you want it to do. So I appreciate that, and very supportive. I also would ask maybe that you take a look at the comments that were made by Commissioner Uli and others. Can't remember who said it now. Okay, all of them. But to maybe have the bricks or running parallel, and if there's a way that you can creatively figure out a way to lose the metal, I think that would be great, because then it would just kind of go away.
Yeah.
So,
And one of the challenges with the metal, even the metal that's there now, and you know because you have a 94-year-old mother, right? I
Correct.
had a dear, sweet mother-in-law who I used to try to take to Mass, and we'd try to walk her up, and on a hot day, she could not touch that rail because it just gets really hot. So yes, the least we can get rid of as much metal as possible, we will try, or use some other methodology to address that.
okay, thank you. Nice job.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner
I'm
Drury.
just going to throw out a reminiscence. So when I was 7 years old, after the earthquake, we went to Mass, and they actually had made a trail between the blocks of stone that had come off the tower. They had the mission still open. I mean, they wouldn't think about doing it nowadays, but it didn't fall in on us. We went to Mass every Sunday, and
Exactly. Yeah.
especially the Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
And it was one of my fondest memories. It was really exciting for me to see what had happened after the earthquake.
And the 1794 church steps are under these. We know from a
Boy.
photograph from the 1950s.
Oh, man.
Mr. Chair.
I'm completely supportive of the project.
Thank you. I am also supportive of the project, and maybe the concept of cold water chilled handrails has come about now. My comment about the front door is I would encourage you to explore swinging the doors out when you drop the threshold. And in the rehab of the door, just simply make the bottom rail a little deeper. I don't think it's really going to change the context of the door, but you would eliminate that kind of funky hinge thing that's always going to be a problem.
Yeah. One of the challenges, Mr. Uli, is right here. See this?
Yeah.
The jams, and we can't, that's one of the first things I looked at, was can I swing the door the other way? And I think that's going to be really problematic without making these doors smaller, because you don't have enough room right at the hinge point because of this pilaster right there.
Yeah, well, tear it out. No.
So it's a bit problematic. I did look at it, but I don't know that solves the problem.
Anyway, I'm very supportive of your effort. Any effort to provide better mobility for individuals is a worthy cause, and doing it at the front door brings dignity and respect to those individuals. So I wholeheartedly support it. And if you can get rid of the metal, A+.
We'll work on it.
Well, I have a divergent viewpoint. Not that I'm not supportive, I'm entirely supportive, I agree with everybody about that. But what troubled me looking at the renderings was that sloping pitch on that last approach, and I just felt it would fit in much better if it were level. Now, that goes in the opposite direction of what you were saying, because it's going to make that all level, and it's going to be more than 30 inches.
It only raises the wall. It doesn't raise the platform that you're standing on. The platform you're standing on is what is measured for the 30 inches, not the curve.
No, I understand, but the railing, if that has to follow the pitch of a ramp behind that wall, then that's going to be
You
sloping.
get rid of the railing.
Well, yeah, if you can. So, yeah, if you can get rid of the railing, that would be great.
Disappears.
Yeah,
Also,
anyway, but,
Mr. Chair.
no, let me finish my comment, please. We'll get to you. So anyway, I think that should be level, and then that solves the problem with the coursework of the stone. It's all level. You know, and even if it means the length of the ramp needs to be longer because that's a level approach at that last stretch, I'd be fine with that. And I think also it's the case that if you're adding a ramp that's not required by something else you're doing, the work is limited to the scope of that improvement. And so you don't necessarily have to put in that parking space there, which might be nice not to have to defile the asphalt.
We would hope that your interpretation of that is the same as the transportation folks that will look at this.
Well, or the building department plan
Right, and
checkers.
they sometimes have different views, but
Exactly.
we haven't touched that yet.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do that until we know we had some support
Yeah.
at this commission.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's, we're all in agreement, it's appropriate improvement, and it's, Mr. Lenvick.
Not critical.
He can hammer.
Hear what you have to say.
There's no reason why the top of that wall could not be stepped gradually, every 4 inches by a 12-inch block or whatever, and it kind of steps down,
Yeah.
and over time, it'll get eroded to be, whatever. So, I mean,
More and more lovely.
Yeah, more lovely,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay. So this is a one-time pre-application consultation review, so there won't be any appealable action today.
Mr. Chair, if you would be able to summarize the commission's comments, though, for the record, we won't need to take a vote on them or make it
Okay,
into a motion.
the
but-
commission is very supportive of the improvement, as it's, somebody said it very eloquently, the dignity of the approach to all users of the church. And the suggestion would be to eliminate as much of the metal railings as possible, and to what extent they need to be there, the stone and the railing should be level for that top approach. Was there anything else that we needed to add?
Coursework should be plumb in the middle.
I thought I said that, the stone and the ironwork.
Because the ironwork is going to follow the slope, it has to, the rail has to follow the slope of the rail.
Yeah, to me.
At least the handrail does.
Yeah, so I mean, there could be a level rail and then a handrail underneath that, but I would rather not see that. I'd rather see it all level at
I
that.
get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
See what I can do.
And
Yeah, okay.
And Chair House, just to kind of add a clarification, I mean, there's no reason why that curb couldn't be higher, right?
Correct,
I mean,
correct.
if there's a minimum, but
Right.
it could be higher and then make it level, and then if you need a railing on the inside, you could do
Then-
it. But
then
I
we've
think
got
you
it.
get the idea of what we're saying, right?
Okay.
Well, and you don't need that 4-inch curb as long as you have a metal rail that's 4 inches up, something like that. So in some ways, being flush with the top landing seems to make more sense to me, but,
Okay, we'll work on it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Excellent project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Did Father Larry still in the church? Larry would move as an earthquake. He's a wonderful guy.
This meeting is adjourned.
Pardon my interruption. Before we adjourn, I just would like to once again announce the postponement of item 5, and then we can.
I'm very impressed by this organization.